Welcome back to Only Talk Sports, and tonight is the 2024 national title game in college basketball between the Purdue Boilermakers and the UConn Huskies. Sorry I wasn't ready to start right when the game started, but we are going to be live streaming the rest of this game, maybe a little bit more in the aftermath. That there's a lot going on, a lot to talk about, and there is, because last night was an epic stream of epic proportions talking about John Calipari going to the Arkansas Razorbacks. We covered that in length of over 3-hour stream. The chat was popping. Everybody was going crazy about that news, and now we're trying to figure out who's going to be going to Kentucky. But instead of letting that news bother us, we got a game on our hands, and we've got Purdue and UConn both tied right now at 7 apiece. Both teams, a lot of people, their fans think that their team can win. I know that more people believe UConn is going to win this game. I predicted UConn to win the national title before the bracket in the season even started, before March Madness even began. I already had UConn penciled in. I'm like, I think they're going to get it done. I just don't really see the UConn Huskies losing to any team. I mean, the way they're playing right now, any team can lose. We know that any team can drop a game, but just the way that they look, how dominant that they've been, the only way they're going to lose is if they get in their own way. And that's what Dan Hurley has said. They just got to continue to play at a high level. And right there was a high-level play from the Huskies. Donovan Clingan down low getting the bucket. And UConn now up 9-7 over Purdue. But yes, Purdue is going to have to play a very good game, an almost perfect game if they want to beat UConn. It can be done, but the Huskies are just playing that well. Can they go back-to-back? Or is Purdue going to win their first national title? Even though they did win a title in the 30s, that really didn't count, I guess you would say, for the NCAA, because it was before the NCAA, but it's still a title, but just not a national title when it comes to March Madness in the NCAA getting a national title. But UConn, they're looking for their sixth and back for the first time since Florida did it back in 06-07. And Dan Hurley, he's a fiery coach, but is he a candidate for the Kentucky job? That's going to be an interesting thing to monitor. But UConn, they just knocked down another bucket. Cam Spencer, the Rutgers transfer, what a revelation he has been for UConn this season. I mean, he's worked up the ranks in college basketball, and he's a steady shooter. He's already got 7 points, which is not a good sign for Purdue. But Zach Edey, that is Purdue's bread and butter. He's averaging 25 points per game this season. He just missed a shot, though, in the mid-post. Now UConn going down the floor. Looked like Stephon Castle kind of lost his energy right there as he went to the basket, kind of blew a tire, and he ended up turning the basketball over later on in the possession with a travel. So a little bit of sloppiness there from the Huskies, something we don't normally see, but it is the national title game. Maybe there will be some jitters, but both teams playing pretty well to start, with UConn up 11-9 over Purdue. But I did a poll asking you guys who you believe is going to win the national title. And actually, 75%, 3 out of the 4 votes, you guys are picking Purdue to win, which is crazy. I know it's just 4 votes, but still, a lot of people believe UConn's going to get it done. But maybe people had a change of heart late, thinking Purdue's going to get it done. It's going to be interesting. Via Ohio State, appreciate you for being here. He says, I hope this is a good game. I would love Purdue to pull off the big upset, get ultimate redemption and the Big Ten, its first title since 2000. But I think UConn is just too good overall. And I agree 100% with that sentiment via Ohio State. Appreciate you for being here. But when you look at Purdue and the Big Ten overall, they just don't recruit the type of players. They don't bring in the type of players and the type roster that's built to win a national title these days overall. Purdue, they got better with the addition of Lance Jones. He's helped out the backcourt along with Braden Smith, Fletcher Loyer. That's massive stuff. And we know what Zach Edey's doing down low. But this is basically the same team, except you have Lance Jones in the backcourt. That addition has helped big time, but Fletcher Loyer, Braden Smith have improved. Guys like Trey Kaufman, Red Mason Gillis, they figured out their spots in the rotation, in the lineup. I think that's helped out tremendously for Purdue. But when you look at the Boilermakers roster versus UConn's roster, it's not the same. UConn just has the athleticism. They got guys that are going to be playing in the NBA. When you look at Stephon Castle, when you look at Donovan Clingan, Purdue just doesn't have those type of guys. I know Zach Edey's going to get drafted, and he's going to be in the NBA, but I don't know if Zach Edey's really necessarily built that well for the NBA. I still think he's going to struggle in the league because he's just not as quick as Donovan Clingan overall. He's not able to recover as quickly on defense, so that's going to be interesting to see for sure with those guys and how they progress when they go into the pros. But I think that's been the biggest drawback for the Big Ten. It's just the type players that they bring into their programs. You saw even Illinois, like Brad Underwood, He's changed the way Illinois' roster was built when they had Kofi Cockburn, the big center down low. Then they had Dane Danger coming in. They didn't really use Dane Danger that much, and they went with Coleman Hawkins at the 5 because that's the more modern style of basketball. Now, obviously, Illinois ran into the buzzsaw that was UConn, but Illinois was a really good team, and that's kind of not what the Big Ten's been doing lately. Illinois kind of breaking the mold there, and I think that is something that the Big Ten really needs to look at, changing their style of play a little bit, and that could help them win more titles in the future. But Purdue, they have a shot to give the Big Ten their first title since 2000. That would make the Big Ten look a whole lot better, especially be able to get a win over UConn, a team that nobody really thinks is going to lose outside of Purdue fans and some people picking an upset. It would be huge for the conference as a whole. The Ohio State says, I think Purdue keeps it close early, but UConn pulls away in the second half, and UConn wins 81-71 to be the first back-to-back champs in men since Florida in 2006, 2007. I agree with Ohio State, and that's the issue with UConn. They have the ability to just blow you out at certain points of the game. Look at Alabama. Alabama played very well against UConn in the Final Four, but there were moments every single time Alabama kind of tied it up. They got it really close, and then UConn would go on that quick 10-0 run. It wasn't nothing crazy like that 28-0 run that they had against Illinois, but that's what UConn does. They have a team that is just capable of any time of flipping the switch, of going in high gear, playing at the ultimate high level. And I don't really think any other team in college basketball this season has a gear that UConn has when they're playing at their best. And that is dangerous. And Purdue is going to have to prevent that if possible. But they're doing it right now. But it's early, like you said, via Ohio State. But Zach Edey knocking down the dunk, and we're all tied up at 11-all with 14:40 to go in the first half of the national championship game. UConn with the basketball. Tristan Newton, the East Carolina transfer. He's dribbling at the top of the key. Camden Heide, he's guarding him. A backup reserve guard for Purdue. Purdue, they like to rotate in a lot of players, even guys that don't score a lot. Smart Matt Painter, he likes to have guys come in that don't score a lot and play defense and just play hard, and that also gives rest to some of the starting players for Purdue. It's very smart stuff. You don't want to just run your starters for 40 minutes, kind of like Creighton does. I feel like Creighton gets tired a lot, Greg McDermott's team, because they don't really have a bench and they just ride their starters all game long and they get tired, and that's what hurts them in the tournament. But Purdue, they got a lot of depth. Most of their guys in the starting 5 are the only ones that score a lot, but they've just got a pretty deep team overall, especially with guys that can just come in and contribute at certain moments of a game. Maybe it's an assist, maybe it's a pass. So Purdue's going to have to be able to stifle UConn's depth as well, because UConn's got a lot of depth. They got a lot of guys that can score. Because that's one of the biggest things that makes UConn such a unique team, because a lot of people look at the Huskies like, man, they're dominant, but nobody really is a dominant scorer on the team. Tristan Newt is the leading scorer for UConn, even though he only averages 15 points per game, which is absolutely crazy to me. 15 points per game is their leading scorer, whereas you look at Purdue, their leading scorer is Zach Edey at 25 points per game, and then their next leading scorer is Braden Smith at 12 points per game. So that's crazy to me. UConn just has so much depth and balance. But Cam Spencer down low, his shot got blocked. UConn's up by 3, 14-11, but trying to drive into the lane. Tristan Newton, he's blocked by Heide. What a play. Heide, a guy known for his defense, but Zach Edey also there as well, bothering that play. 6 seconds on the shot clock. Hummus Hero says, good evening, Jeffrey and friends. Appreciate you for being here, Hummus Hero. Usually you pop in a little bit later, but I know you probably wanted to be here for the national championship game. Everybody is, and I do appreciate you for being here, Hummus Hero. But definitely a lot of people were upset about the late start time. That's just the way it goes. They always start the national title game late so everybody can watch, even people on the West Coast. But it does hurt people on the East Coast, especially people that got to go to work the next morning. But unless you're just not a fan of either team and you don't really care, most people are going to be watching this game. Down low, you got Zach Edey, who did a good job on the defensive end on the last possession, and he just did a good job on the offensive end with a layup. That's his signature move, getting it into the middle of the post and knocking it in with that soft touch, and it's 14-13. Purdue hanging tough right now, but there's still a lot of time for things to go wrong. Purdue just cannot let things get out of hand. Zach Edey's got 8 points. Down the floor, Hassan Jara for UConn knocking it in, 16-13. The Huskies have a lot of depth as well. 12:40 to go in the first half. 3-point lead for UConn. Zach Edey's got 8 of the 13 points for Purdue. That's going to have to change. Zach Edey can't continue to do it all for Purdue. Donovan Clingan battling with Edey down low. Lance Jones, top of the key, the Southern Illinois transfer. He kicks it into Zach Edey on the block. Working Clingan up and under, and Zach Edey laying it in and one. What a play by Zach Edey. Donovan Clingan, almost just as tall as Zach Edey, but a little bit quicker. But Zach Edey worked him on the block and went up and under. That's a really good play for Zach Edey right there. He's going to have to do those kind of moves in the NBA if he's going to have success. Jackson says, what's up, Only Talk Sports Nation? Appreciate you for being here, Jackson. Appreciate it a lot. Cannot wait for the rest of this game. He also says good evening to Hummus Hero. And Hummus Hero said he hopes this game is a classic. And that's what you always can hope for. Whether you are a fan of either team or any of the teams that are in the national championship game, you just want the game to be close. You want it to be entertaining, go down to the wire. Because if it's not close, I mean, yes, it's great for the team that won and their fan base. But other than that, it just kind of stinks because it wasn't an entertaining game. It was just a blowout. I mean, UConn, San Diego State last year, it was a good game at times, but then it kind of got to be a blowout toward the end. Really wasn't that competitive. And I was live for that game as well. This is my second game, national championship, that I've been able to do a live stream for. And hopefully this game is better than that game was. And we'll see if UConn will be the winner of both. But UConn just laid it in. It's 18-16. The Huskies with a 2-point lead. Under 12 to go in the first half. Braden Smith almost loses the basketball, but now he's trying to drive in. Kicks in the corner to Mason Gillis. Down to Zach Edey on the block. Out to Braden Smith. Now Miles Colvin down to Edey to Colvin for three, and it's off the mark. But Purdue with the offensive rebound. Mason Gillis down low, and there's a foul, and that will be the under 12 timeout. But Purdue, that's really good. They just did that. I know Clingan wasn't in the game, but Purdue's got to get offensive rebounds because a lot of times you're not going to score the first time against UConn. It can be done, but UConn's defense is that good. You have to be able to get offensive rebounds and putbacks, get to the foul line. I feel like that's something Alabama really struggled with in the game against UConn, is that they weren't really able to rebound at a high level. They were able to knock down threes in that game, but then once their threes kind of stopped falling and then they needed to kind of drive in and they got swatted away or they just couldn't score at all, they couldn't get the rebounds. And UConn, they just started blowing it open late in that game. So Purdue definitely has to rebound well. Hummus Hero said, and Newton traveled there. I mean, there's going to be a lot of missed calls. I've noticed that, like with the traveling call anyway, that more and more players are getting away with traveling. Guys are taking 4 and 5 and sometimes 6 steps, it seems, and there's no call. I mean, not always. It seems like they consistently call a travel the most often when you have a guy catching the ball like at the top of the key and he's kind of running and he takes 2 steps and then he takes another one. They'll call that, but then when you got a guy driving in the lane and it's a Euro step, that's not a Euro step. I mean, it's unbelievable that they don't call some of these travels, but it is what it is. Hopefully, the refs will get most of the calls right tonight. Well, Goo, appreciate you for being here. He says, how can I watch this game? Well, the game is on TBS. So, I mean, I don't know what your streaming service is or what if you have cable or whatever, whether it covers it or not, but I don't really know how else to help you in that department. But do appreciate you for being here. I'll try to do my best to do the coverage of the game. Might not be the official broadcast or anything like that, but definitely try my best to act like it's a radio kind of deal where you're listening to it and you can't see the game and try to get at least a good feel for what's happening. But do appreciate you for being Hummus Hero pointing it out as well that it's on TBS and TNT. Hummus Hero says Edey's playing like a man possessed. Yeah, he's playing very well, and that's a good sign for Purdue. But the thing is that his teammates not really doing that much right now, and that's not sustainable because he's going to run out of steam toward the end of the game, I believe. He's going to struggle to keep up the same level of energy when there's like 5 minutes to go in the second half. If he's already doing all this now and Purdue's still losing, to me, that's not a good sign. Purdue needs the other players, Fletcher Loyer, Braden Smith, Lance Jones, the backcourt for Purdue. And I said this when I made my prediction for this game. Even though I did pick UConn, I said that the guards in this game are going to be the key. They are going to be the matchup to watch. If UConn's guards outperform Purdue's guards, I believe the game's over. I just don't see any way where Purdue wins because even though if Zach Edey outperforms Clingan, maybe he scores like 25 and Clingan only has like 12 or something like that. If UConn's backcourt, Stephon Castle and Cam Spencer and Tristan Newton, if they beat out Purdue's backcourt, the Huskies are probably going to win this game. Plus, you got Alex Caravan on the wing as well, whereas Purdue, they got some decent wing players, but nobody that's really of the caliber of Alex Caravan when it comes to shooting the basketball at the height that he's at. So it's going to be really interesting. I can't wait to see what happens. Purdue hanging tough, but it's going to be very tough for them to do it for a full 40 against the UConn Huskies. It's kind of like Iowa and South Carolina in women's basketball. I picked South Carolina because, to me, the South Carolina women's team was just very similar to UConn men's this year. They had a very deep team, and they had a lot of players that could score. A lot of players that could score. Nobody really was the leading scorer. All of the women for South Carolina, all of them averaged like under 15 points. And it's the same thing as the UConn men's team. The exact same deal. All of them, none of them are really the guy. There's not really a significant player for UConn where it's like he's got to break out. He's got to have a massive game to win. Because you look at like North Carolina, R.J. Davis had to play well for them to win. Alabama, Mark Sears had to play well for them to win. And with Purdue, technically Zach Edey has to play well for them to win. And if that doesn't happen, they're not going to win. The team's just not going to win. I feel like UConn just has so many guys. If one or two of them don't have a good night, the other guys are going to step up and they're going to help them win. But Purdue getting some production from somebody else, not named Zach Edey, that's massive there with Braden Smith going into the lane, laying it in. And now we've got a tie game once again, 18-18, 10:50 to go in the first half. Cam Spencer, top of the key, being guarded by Braden Smith. Now over to Tristan Newton, who was kind of quiet against Alabama, taking a mid-range jumper. He's off the mark, and a rebound by Miles Colvin. So Purdue with a chance to take the lead here. Braden Smith dribbling between his legs, going into the mid-range, taking a jumper, and it's off the mark. Cam Spencer with the board. So Purdue was not able to get the rebound there. Zach Edey couldn't get it done. Klingon is in the game as well for UConn again. So the giant matchup. Down the floor, Hassan Jara loses the ball. Mason Gillis with the takeaway. What a play. Fletcher Loyer down the floor, but what a block by Alex Caravan. Erasing the potential layup for Fletcher Loyer. Now Tristan Newton in the corner to Jara for three, and he knocks it down. UConn with a 3-point lead. 21-18. And funny enough, Hassan Jara did not play a lot for UConn this season. He played more last year, the transfer from Texas A&M, but he's having a big impact in this one. Very experienced guy. Probably Dan Hurley looking for that type of experience in this game. Now you've got Edey down low, and there's a foul on UConn. 9:49 to go in the first. Edey's been a beast so far in this game, basically carrying the Purdue Boilermakers like he often does, but it feels like he's carrying them even more than normal in this game, and he's going to have to continue to do so. I think maybe the way this game's going right now, he could have to have over 30 points for Purdue to win. We'll have to see. Maybe he can have like 25, and if the other guys step up, but just with the current trajectory of the game, Edey's doing a lot. His first free throw, though, is off the mark. And then you see Dan Hurley clapping his hands and screaming, yes, that's Dan Hurley for you. He just reminds me of a younger version of John Calipari, but he's got his own style, his own brand of brassness that he portrays himself with. I mean, he argues every call. He's always on the floor. He's always going crazy. He's got enough energy for like 20 guys. It's unbelievable. But Edey knocking down the second free throw there. So 21-19, 9:40 to go in the first half. Tristan Newton with the basketball, bringing it up the floor. Kicks to Hassan Jara, who's getting a lot of playing time here for UConn. Huskies with a 2-point lead. Klingon with the ball. Beyond the 3-point line, that's not his strength. Kicks it to somebody else. Finally finds Tristan Newton. Newton back out on the outside, going inside for the Huskies. Back to Klingon. Klingon off the mark, and Edey with the board. What a play by Zach Edey. Like you said earlier, Hummus here, like a man possessed is the way he's playing. Down the floor, Braden Smith going up with it, and he laid it in with a little flex afterward. Tie game, 21-all. Purdue hanging tough. 9 to go in the first half of this national championship game. Purdue wants it. They got it in their eyes. They want revenge. To be like Virginia, after they lost to a 16th seed, they want that national championship. Their first ever. Hassan Jara driving in, has nowhere to go. Kicks to Klingon, trying to get it to Newton. Can't get it to him. Stephon Castle for three, and his shot is short. Edey with the easy board. Kicks over to Braden Smith, going down the floor. 8:30 to go in the first half. Braden Smith driving in. Kicks to Trey Kaufman-Renn, and there's a massive collision. Oh, no, hopefully those guys are okay. But Trey Kaufman-Renn and Hassan Jara, that was an ugly play right there. Could have been terrible, but both guys are on their feet. Looks like they're okay, but that could have been bad. Hassan Jara went airborne. Man, had some contact with Trey Kaufman-Renn's head. I mean, it's a national championship game. What can you expect? Guys are laying it out on the line, laying it all on the floor. You love to see it, but you don't want guys getting hurt. Now I think there was a turnover from Purdue. Might have been an illegal screen, but whatever it was, UConn's going to have the basketball. Hassan Jara and Samson Johnson, two rotational players for the Huskies, both have 2 fouls now, though. That's not going to be good for UConn, but they do have a lot of depth, so I don't think that's going to be an issue yet. It's something to monitor right now. UConn definitely is still in decent shape overall. None of the really important players are in foul trouble. Lance Jones just picked up his second foul for Purdue, so it was his illegal screen, and that's not good because Lance Jones is a key contributor for Purdue. Can Purdue handle it without him on the floor? Camden Heidi's in the game instead. Zach Edey in the paint, knocking it down, scoring again. Edey up to 14 points, 23-21. And they're showing the fans back at Mackey Arena in West Lafayette. They're going crazy. They want to see their Boilers get the win. But Edey already with 14 points, 6 of 8 shooting. Zach Edey ready for the spotlight in what is his last game of college basketball, wanting to get that national championship. Stephon Castle probing for UConn. Thought about taking the mid-range jumper, but Edey was on him. Cam Spencer driving it back to Castle with Edey trying to box out there, and he's not able to hit the shot. So now Purdue going back the other way. Braden Smith with the ball. He's had a pretty good first half. In the mid-range, his shot is off the mark. Edey can't get the board. Now Tristan Newton for UConn in the middle of the floor. Huskies down by 2. Crossover dribble in the lane. Newton going up with it, and he lays it in. That's a good play. Shielded his body from Zach Edey. Wouldn't allow Edey to get that block, and we're tied once again. That has to be like 7 ties already. I hope it continues. 8 ties is how many ties there's been. In 4 lead changes, UConn's largest lead has been 3, and Purdue's largest lead has been 2. Edey could have been an illegal screen. They didn't call it. And now there's a travel, which Dan Hurley was prompt to call out. Dan Hurley's always on the case, looking for fouls, looking for miscues by the other team. Even if there isn't one, sometimes he's calling it out anyway. But we're all tied up at 23 with the under 8 timeout. We got a good one so far in the national championship. Hummus Hero says they call it traveling when it looks awkward on the 3rd step, but sometimes the guy just picks up the ball and starts running like Barry Sanders and no call. Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I wish they would call traveling more often to cut back on travels, because the reason why so many guys travel is because they don't call it. But I do agree with you. When it's kind of an awkward step, they call it every time. But if it's kind of free-flowing and fluid and it's hard to tell, I guess, from the naked eye, they don't call it. But when you're watching it on TV or you see a replay of it, you know it was traveling, and it's very frustrating. But I agree with you 100%, Hummus. And then Hummus Hero also says foul trouble for UConn could be a big equalizer in this game if that happens. I mean, it might be something Purdue has to have. I mean, I'm not saying Purdue can't win or it's going to be a long shot or anything like that. But to me, certain things need to go Purdue's way for UConn to win, to your point. Like maybe some foul trouble for UConn, or maybe just one of their better players like Tristan Newton or Cam Spencer, which Cam Spencer's already playing well, but maybe one of their better players just doesn't play that good, has a horrible game for their standards, or maybe Klingon gets in foul trouble, to your point. I feel like with Purdue, they just have to play a better game than UConn's going to have to play to win. Purdue's going to have to almost be perfect. They can win with mistakes, but they can't have too many mistakes. So it's going to be really interesting. I just hope for Purdue fans' sake that their team goes out there and can keep it close. And if they don't win, it was hard fought and it goes down to the wire. You don't want a blowout loss. I know a lot of people say that you would prefer a blowout loss to a heartbreaking loss, but at least if you barely lost, you can kind of convince yourself, man, we were this close to winning. But if you get blown out, it's like, well, we just weren't good enough. So to me, it would be better for Purdue if they barely lost than if they got blown out. But obviously, it would be better if they win, and if they obviously could win. It's going to be really interesting. I think it's funny, too, seeing who people want to root for, like, especially from an Indiana fan perspective. A lot of Indiana fans, they don't want UConn to win because they don't want them getting their 6th national title, which is going to pass Duke and Indiana in that regard. And then they don't want Purdue to win because it'll be their 1st national title ever, and then Purdue fans will brag about that. But then you also have the aspect of the Big Ten hasn't won a title since 2000, so some people do want it in that regard from the Indiana perspective. But from a national perspective, I think people are pretty mixed. But I do think more people want Purdue to win from a national perspective, just so UConn winning back-to-back. You don't want to get too big head or anything like that. Oh, man, we're the best program now, which there's always an argument for that. Kentucky fans will say they're the best. Kansas fans will say they're the best. But all these programs are at the top. UConn's entered that territory. Duke, Carolina, Kentucky, Kansas, UCLA in the past, Indiana, Con. Some of these programs, they're in that group. They're in the blue blood argument. There's always going to be an argument for who's the best. But UConn's definitely entered that territory. And I agree. Like Sports Talk with Austin just said right here, and I appreciate you for being here, Austin. He says if UConn wins, I think they will have deserve their way in history, cemented themselves as a blue blood. Absolutely. They already are to most people. Like 99% of people consider them a blue blood. But if they win again, definitely. The only thing they don't have is like the historical presence of being great back in the past, like these other programs had. Like UConn wasn't really relevant until the 90s. They didn't have a lot of success before that. But what they've done in the last 25 years and having 6 titles, definitely they're a blue blood. Really, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. But UConn just scored and won. So it's 25-23. Donovan Clingan with 4 points and 2 rebounds, 2 of 3 from the field. Donovan Clingan, he's not going to score as much as Zach Edey, but he just has to do his job. He's got to guard Edey as best he can, can't get into foul trouble, and he's just going to score into double figures, I believe, and UConn will be fine as long as their guards play well. So UConn now at 26-23 because Clingan knocked down the free throw. Huskies are 3 of 3 at the line. Boilermakers are 3 of 4. Free throws are always something to monitor. Lawyer in the lane, his shot's off the mark. Trey Kaufman-Renn tried to tap it back in, and there's a foul, and I think they called it on Trey Kaufman-Renn. Purdue fans don't like it. They're showing the fans up close. They do not agree with the call, but it did look like he went over and back. UConn fans definitely love the call. 6:23 to go in the first half. Edey carrying Purdue hard, but other guys have to step up. They said Zach Edey has only rested 33 seconds in the previous 2 games. But, this is it. It's the Final Four. It's the national championship. If you want to win, you got to give it everything you got. So Edey's got to play. By far, Purdue's best player. There's really no way you can take him off the floor unless he fouls out of the game. Edey saves the ball from going out of bounds. Purdue going down the floor. 6 to go in the first half. Braden Smith driving into the lane. Kicks over to Fletcher Lawyer. Lawyer driving in the mid-range, and his shot barely goes off the rim, and Zach Edey taps it back in. Could have been basket interference, and Dan Hurley, he's calling for it. He's calling for basket interference. He doesn't like it. I knew he would. But it did like maybe it was off the rim, but it could have been looked at. We'll see if they do look at it. But Edey now is 16 points. But Fletcher Lawyer struggling to start. Not a good sign for Purdue, especially with Lance Jones on the bench. Cam Spencer driving into the lane. He lays it in, but they're going to call the foul on the floor, and Cam Spencer doesn't like the call. But Cam Spencer, he didn't go on about it like Dan Hurley would because he doesn't want to get a technical. That's a smart play by a veteran player in Cam Spencer, but it could have been an and-one. That was a really good play by Cam Spencer, but still, with the foul being on the floor, UConn at least gets the ball back, but it does take points away from what they could have had. Tristan Newton in the left corner, kicks to Clingan. Clingan driving in with a little floater, and he gets the roll. That's definitely a little fortuitous right there. Didn't look like a great shot, but it hit the back iron and it went in. Clingan's got 7 points, 3 of 5 from the field. The big man's doing his job. 5 to go in the first half. Braden Smith, Tristan Newton. What a point guard matchup we have. Fletcher Lawyer kicking it to Zach Edey. Clingan on him. What a big man matchup. Driving in. Edey going over the right shoulder, and his shot's off the rim. And Trey Kaufman-Renn loses it out of bounds. Lucky that he did not pick up another foul because it could have been. He kind of reached in there, but I guess the referees saw that both guys were going for it and did not give him the foul. But, man, Edey's shot was very close, but just couldn't get it to fall. But now UConn bringing it back the other way. Under 5 to go in the first half. The first half has been flying by. There hasn't been too many fouls. It's been fairly free-flowing. The scoring, it's been up and down. It hasn't been at the high-scoring first half in the world. But the Huskies and the Boilermakers both playing high-level basketball. And Tristan Newton, what a reverse. What a pass at the top of the key by the Huskies. And now UConn leads by 5. It's not danger zone yet for Purdue, but they need a bucket. Huskies on a 9-2 run. Purdue doesn't want to be down by 10 or so at the half. They got to keep this close. Braden Smith driving into the lane. Thought about the mid-range kicks to Trey Kaufman-Renn, who's had an improved season for Purdue. He goes up with it, but what a block by UConn. But Donovan Clingan couldn't save it from going out of bounds. That's a great effort by Donovan Clingan. I mean, when you got a guy with the mobility that he has at his size, it makes it so tough to be able to score on him. And that was a great play. Stephon Castle is the one that made that backdoor cut pass to Tristan Newton. The freshman, by far, he's played like a veteran in March Madness, more so than almost any other freshman. Of all the talented five-star freshmen in this class, Stephon Castle, he's definitely raising his draft stock with his play in March Madness. Purdue misses. Zach Edey couldn't get it done. Castle going down the floor. Kicks to Caravan. He faked the three, shoots the three. It's off the mark. Edey with another rebound. Edey's easily going to get a double-double in this game at this rate. 4 to go in the first half. Purdue, their offense has gone kind of cold, and their points have all come from inside. Purdue has not even hit a three yet. UConn's knocked down 3. Inside, Fletcher Lawyer loses the ball out of bounds, and they're going to say it's off Lawyer's knee. So turnover for Purdue. UConn's defense starting to pressure the Boilermakers a little bit, and their offense is starting to disappear. Timeout on the floor. Brock, RTR, Roll Tide Roll, appreciate you for being here. He says Edey is a problem. Absolutely. I mean, that's what a lot of people have said. People that aren't fans of Purdue or their style of play or just the Big Ten style of play, that's what they always say when talking negatively about Purdue, that if you take Zach Edey off of this team, Purdue is horrible. They're not nowhere near as good of a team. And it's not that their other players are terrible. It's just that compared to what they are, there's no way that Purdue would have been able to be a team that's won the Big Ten last couple of years, and they wouldn't have been a team that made this deep run in the tournament to a national championship game. Purdue would have probably been a tournament team, but just definitely Zach Edey, he covers up a lot of the issues that they have. Because, I mean, Braden Smith, he's a capable player off the dribble, but what creates a lot of his dribble drive opportunities is when Edey sets screens. And when you have a guy like that, that big setting screens, you could go off those screens and drive into the lane. Plus, when you have a guy down low and Zach Edey that's so big, when you pass the ball, even if your passes aren't all that great, a lot of times Zach Edey will still catch it anyway because he's so big. So that's the thing. Edey makes Purdue what they are, and it's going to be very interesting to see how Purdue is next season without Edey. Will they still be good? Because I know they got another 7-footer on their team. He's a freshman. And he's definitely a guy that maybe can step in and have some success after Edey's gone, because I'm sure he's learned behind Edey, but he's not going to be scoring 25 points per game. And if Purdue doesn't bring in some dynamic guards, I mean, maybe Lawyer and Braden Smith improve even more from this season, but it's going to be interesting. Will Purdue still be very good next season? I have no idea. But UConn, I mean, they got the perfect blend of what you want. You've got a 5-star talent in Stephon Castle. You've got a guy in Donovan Clingan who came back from last year, improved, and is going to be a pretty high draft pick. And then you got another guy in Alex Caravan who could be a draft pick but came back from last year. So you got those culture guys that stayed. And then you got guys like Hassan Jara off the bench that don't play that much, but he's a veteran guy. That's very important as well. And then you bring in Tristan Newton and Cam Spencer, who are both transfer portal guards. Tristan Newton was with them last year. Cam Spencer coming in this year. But they have a lot of experience, both fantastic players. It's like UConn's got a perfect amount of transfers, 5-star talent, and returning players from last season. And that they just have a great roster overall. And a lot of other teams, there's always a roster flaw somewhere. I mean, UConn, I'm sure you can point to a flaw somewhere, but they don't have many flaws as a team. What's crazy enough is sometimes UConn goes on their big runs when Donovan Clingan isn't even on the floor. It's almost like they're even more spaced out and open when he's not on the floor. Now, they've had big runs when he's been in, but UConn, there's just so many different ways they can beat you. There's so many different ways that they can go on big runs. It's not always the same way. It's not always a flurry of threes, or it's not always just dunks or layups. I mean, against Illinois, UConn didn't even hit that many threes, but they're also capable of hitting threes as well. They've got 3 in this game so far, but Purdue, it's just going to be very tough, like I said earlier, for them to keep up with the Huskies if other players other than Edey do not step up. Edey's playing great, but the other guys, Besides Braden Smith, he's played well, but everyone else just hasn't done that much for Purdue. And Matt Painter, he's a bit worried, which is why he's brought Lance Jones back in despite him having 2 fouls. Huskies up by 5. They're on a big 9-2 run right now. Stephon Castle driving into the lane, goes up with it, and he gets the friendly roll. The 5-star freshman who's going to probably be a lottery pick, playing well in this game like he did in the Final Four against Alabama. 32-25. Huskies lead by 7. 3:10 to go in the first. Only 1 field goal for Purdue in the last 450. That is not sustainable, but that drought has ended because Braden Smith knocks down a mid-range jumper. It's a good play for Braden Smith, but him and Edey, only guys getting it going right now. He's got 6 points. Edey's got 16, so they got 22 of the 27 for Purdue. Tristan Newton with the basketball, trying to find somebody to get the ball to. Finds Castle. Castle can pass. He's driving, though, looking to score, going into the lane, and they call an offensive foul. I know Dan Hurley's not going to like that call. Yep, he's calling for a flop right there. Was it a flop? I don't know. I think it was a foul on Castle, but you can argue that Lance Jones wasn't set. He really wasn't going straight up. He kind of was moving, so it could have been a block, but I don't think it was a flop. But Dan Hurley, he's always going to call a flop, even if it's not. But Purdue down by 5. They need a bucket. Zach Edey looking for somebody. Finds Braden Smith. Thought about the 3. Passes up on it. Still dribbling top of the key. 2:20 to go in the first half. Braden Smith with Caravan on. That's a mismatch. Takes a little screen from Edey, and he drains the triple. And that's what having a guy like Edey does for you. That little screen with a big guy like that, it just creates a little more separation than it would for most other bigs. And that was the first made 3 for Purdue in this game. And now UConn uses a timeout. They're use it or lose it timeout in the first half. Dan Hurley wanting to talk things over. Brock RTR, he says Clingan has 2 fouls. I didn't even know that he did, but he's still been in the game. So both coaches, they're rolling the dice with their players, letting them play with 2 fouls. Like I said, Purdue brought in Lance Jones, even though he's got 2 fouls back into the game because there's no time to worry about fouls. This is it. This is for all the marbles. It's the national championship game. You just have to deal with your guys in foul trouble. You just got to tell them, do not pick up any more. Obviously, I mean, we want you to play defense, but do not foul. Just don't commit any stupid fouls, and you should be fine. Because you feel like the refs are letting them play. I mean, they're not going to call ticky-tacks you wouldn't believe because it is the national championship game. But a lot of guys have 2 fouls. But again, the coaches are just having to deal with it and let those guys play because if you sit the guys on the bench too long and you end up losing the game because of it, that's going to make a lot of people upset. A lot of fans upset if the team loses, and they'll be like, well, Matt Painter, you should have played Lance Jones more. You kept him on the bench too long. Or, oh, you kept Donovan Clingan on the bench too long, Dan Hurley. So it's crazy. It's always tough. It's always, a mystery of what's the right move to make. But I think in this game anyway, you got to trust your guys. You got to tell them not to pick up another silly foul. Let them play because this is it. You got to let them play. Hummus Hero says UConn's outside shooting really has been the difference so far. Absolutely. And you see that with a lot of teams. And especially when teams play the Big Ten, because you've seen outside of like Iowa or maybe Illinois, a lot of the teams in the Big Ten really didn't shoot that well from 3. And there were a lot of games where you take a team like Indiana or you take a team like Rutgers or something like that, and they would play pretty well, but they would lose because of the fact maybe they only had like 3 or 4 made threes, and then the other team had 12 made threes. And even though the Big Ten team scored more in the paint, they didn't score more on the outside shooting threes. And 3s count more than 2s. Even though 2s are important, it's good to have centers. It's good to have back to the basket big men in certain situations. At the end of the day, you still can't rely on that exclusively. You got to have guys that can knock down 3s because they do count more than 2s. Alabama made it to the Final Four basically shooting 3s. I mean, that's why they got where they got. Same thing with Auburn that year when they made it all the way to the Final Four a few years ago and they lost to Virginia. That team knocked off several blue bloods in the tournament because they kept knocking down 3s at a ridiculous rate. And yes, 3s, it's more luck than 2s, but you still, if you have skilled shooters, you're going to be able to knock them down at a better rate, unless you're just cold. So that's the thing. You have to be able to mix it up and shoot 3s when you're feeling it or when the game calls for it, and then be able to shoot 2s as well. You got to be able to mix it up. And I feel like UConn has that perfect balance of being able to shoot on the outside and shoot on the inside. But Edey and Smith, Zach Edey and Braden Smith have 25 of the 30 points for Purdue. The rest of the team only has 5 points. And like I said, if that continues for the rest of this game, I can guarantee you that Purdue will lose. There is no way they're going to win if that continues. The other players got to do your part. Fletcher Lawyer's got to get his head in the game. Really struggling right now. But Donovan Clingan kicks to Tristan Newton. That's a beautiful play. And you know that's a design play by Dan Hurley. You get Donovan Clingan in space in the middle of the floor, one dribble off curl action, get Tristan Newton the ball, and it's an easy floater for a guy who's very good at floaters. That's just a smart play by Dan Hurley. That's why a lot of people think he's the best coach in college basketball right now, the way he is coaching at this high of a level. He is locked in. Fletcher Lawyer kicking to Gillis, down low to Edey. Edey misses the shot. Gillis with the offensive rebound, and there is a tie-up. Purdue has the possession arrow, but Mason Gillis does not agree. It looked like he had the ball, but UConn was going for it. They were grabbing at it, and, man, that's a tough call, though. But at least for Purdue, they are getting the ball back, but I think that should have been a foul. Maybe they had all ball. I couldn't really tell. It's tough to tell unless they show a close-up replay, but it is what it is. 1:33 to go in the first half, and now Purdue, they use their timeout. The use it or lose it timeout. You might as well use it. Purdue is struggling to inbound the ball. So now they're taking a timeout, and Matt Painter probably going to draw up a play. Now, the crazy thing about it is when you have an inbounds play and it doesn't work, it's always interesting to see whether it's like the coach's fault, like the play that he drew up was bad, or the players didn't run the play the way the coach wanted it to be run. Because that can happen. We've seen it a lot before where the coach actually had a good drawn-up play out of a timeout, and then the players don't execute on it. So we'll see if Matt Painter can get his team to run a really good play here to cut into this margin. But UConn up by 4. If Purdue's down by 2 to 4 points at half, that's sustainable. I think they can still hang around. But definitely UConn can't be up around 7, 8, 9 points at the half. I think Purdue might be done if that's the case. It's just Purdue can't fall behind. You definitely cannot fall behind if you are Purdue. But Gene Cady, he's at the game. The old Purdue coach from 1980 to 2005, he had 512 career wins, most in school history, which is absolutely crazy. Matt Painter, though, has been there ever since. So they've only had 2 coaches for the last 44 years. That's unbelievable. Shows you the culture at Purdue. But for Gene Cady, a lot of people hoping Matt Painter can get a national title while he is still alive and able to see it. Gene Cady, hopefully he's got many years left in him. He was a really good coach. But Purdue, their play did not work. And UConn, with a nice block, they're going back the other way. But now almost a turnover. Edey and Clingan fighting for it, and it's another top. And the arrow is with UConn this time because last time the ball went to Purdue. But a really good play there by Zach Edey. Laying it on the line, diving on the floor, going for that ball. It's what you got to do. Zach Edey's locked in. And Matt Painter, he knows. If they talk to him at half, I'm sure he's going to say to the reporter that, yes, Zach Edey's keeping us in this game. If it wasn't for him, we'd be definitely in hot water. He's playing an excellent first half. 1:08 to go in the first half, though. UConn 34, Purdue 30. Yeah, it's funny because on the screen it said the possession arrow was still with Purdue, and the referees had to go to the monitor to check. It's like, obviously it's off, or the possession arrow is with the UConn Huskies this time because it was with Purdue last time. That was very obvious. That's funny. But UConn to inbound the ball with a 4-point lead. 9 on the shot clock. Clingan for 3. His shot's off the mark. We know Clingan can hit that, but maybe not the shot UConn was looking for there. 55 seconds left. Newton trying to drive, nowhere to go. Castle passing it back to Newton. Newton driving in. His shot's off the mark. And Castle with the putback. Stephon Castle is having an excellent first half. He is growing up before our very eyes. What a player. He is going to be a pretty good pro, it seems like, the way he has improved from the beginning of the season at UConn when he was injured, and now it's pretty remarkable. And now Castle, he just stole the basketball from Braden Smith. What a play there. Saves it from going out of bounds, kicks it to Cam Spencer. Stephon Castle with some highlight plays. Unbelievable. 20 seconds to go in the first half, and UConn with a chance to go up by 8 or 9 points. This is bad news bears for the Purdue Boilermakers. Purdue needs a stop. Tristan Newton, top of the key. Braden Smith on him. Dribbling, kicks to Cam Spencer. In the mid-range, Spencer goes up with it, and it's in and out. Lawyer with the board. He chucks it at the rim, and it almost was close, but it's off the mark, and the Huskies with a 6-point lead. 36-30. I don't know how you guys in chat are feeling about this first half and whether it stacks up well for Purdue or not, because in the poll, we have 13 votes, 54% of you guys going with Purdue still, 46% going with UConn to win the game. But I still think that this first half, it plays more into UConn's favor. They have the lead. They started going on that run, ended the half on a 15-7 run. And then when you look at Purdue, Zach Edey's doing it all, and no one else is really stepping up. I mean, that can change. Maybe in the second half, Lawyer will get it going. Lance Jones will get it going. He was in some foul trouble. But some of these other guys for Purdue have to step up, or it just isn't looking good for their chances. I just don't see a world where Purdue can win if Braden Smith and Zach Edey are scoring 70 to 75% of Purdue's points. They need their other players to step up. They've got the talent. They got the depth, even though UConn's more talented and probably just has as much depth, if not more depth than Purdue. But the Boilers, they're not playing the type of game that's going to benefit them in the long run. You kind of look how Illinois, when they played against UConn in the Elite Eight, Illinois had a lot of moments where they could have maybe taken the lead or been able to build up a lead on UConn, but they kept making mistakes, went down at half by a few points, and then in the second half, UConn blew it open. We'll have to see. I think Purdue's better than Illinois, but we'll see if UConn does that in the start of the second half. Hummus Hero says Braden Smith is playing really well. I agree 100%, Hummus Hero. Braden Smith, I mean, his play at the guard position is like been Purdue's only hope, because even a lot of Zach Edey's success has been because of Braden Smith. I mean, Zach Edey, he creates a lot of his own success at times, but Braden Smith in that kind of pick and roll kind of situation, it's really helped Braden Smith get going from outside, knock down that big three. He's gotten to the rim a couple of times, and he's had some good passes to Zach Edey. Braden Smith's locked in. I mean, he's ready for this moment. But then you look at Fletcher Lawyer. Fletcher Lawyer's always been a player that's intrigued me for Purdue, because at times he's like their second best player, it seems. Like he almost outperforms Braden Smith at times. Even though Braden Smith's a pure point guard, has more assists. Like Lawyer's had some really good games before. But then there are games where he just disappears. And right now, this is one of them. And you cannot disappear in the national championship game. It's tough because the limelight's the biggest. There's one game left, and you don't want to lose. You don't want to choke, but you can't have that mindset. You got to play to win. You just got to give it everything you've got and not think about it. Have the blinders on. It just doesn't look like Fletcher Lawyer's all that engaged, and that's not a good sign for Purdue. But Braden Smith, he's keeping him in it right now with his play along with Edey. Like Hummus Hero said, the two-man game with Smith and Edey is potent. Both of them are very fun to watch. They play very well off each other, and that's what's also going to be interesting with Braden Smith. With Zach Edey's gone next season, how is Braden Smith going to look? I have no idea how he's going to perform. Is he going to regress with points? Is his assist numbers going to go down? Would he even go to another team possibly? And, you know, where they maybe will have a big where he can pass the ball to. I don't know. I mean, he'll probably stay at Purdue, but you never know. I mean, it's going to be different without Edey out there. Purdue's is going to be so much different. And that's why a lot of people believe, kind of like with Caitlin Clark in Iowa, a lot of people are like, if Iowa doesn't win it this year with Caitlin Clark, they're not going to win it because they're going to regress, you would think, without Caitlin Clark. Whereas you look at a team like South Carolina, they're probably going to do it again with Don Staley at head coach. But then when you look with Purdue, without Zach Edey, can they get back here? Whereas UConn, as long as Dan Hurley stays, I mean, reason to believe that UConn's just going to keep making deep runs. They're going to keep advancing to the Final Fours and Elite Eights and maybe even make it to the national championship game. Who knows? But that's very well possible for UConn as long as Dan Hurley stays. And then that begs the question with the Kentucky job. Like, we talked about it a lot. We talked about it a lot in our live stream last night. It was a fantastic live stream, a lot of laughs, a lot of fun there. Talking about John Calipari going to Arkansas. But then you look at the candidates for the Kentucky job. And I wrote on Twitter because Jay Wright, they've already asked him on the CBS, TNT, TBS broadcast. They already asked him saying, are you interested in the Kentucky job? And he said no. And he basically said no like 5 times. And I've said this tons of times. Jay Wright is not interested in any job. And so many people believe that Jay Wright would take the Ohio State job. I remember a lot of Ohio State fans saying Jay Wright is going to take the basketball job there. And I'm like, he's not. He could have possibly gotten the North Carolina job after Roy Williams retired. but he stayed at Villanova. I believe Jay Wright, he doesn't like NIL. He's not a fan of the portal. I think he is content to continue being on the broadcast team. He enjoys it. He's had a lot of fun. If you see his face, he just is really enjoying doing what he's doing right now. I just don't see him becoming a coach again. I mean, if I'm wrong, I will own up to it and say that I'm wrong, but I believe that Jay Wright is not interested in any job. And if he's not going to take a job like Kentucky, why else would he take any other job? It makes absolutely no sense to me. And I did a poll earlier today asking people, who do you think will be Kentucky's next head coach? And the votes were very split between Nate Oates, Scott Drew, Dan Hurley, and Billy Donovan. Now, Nate Oates is off the table. He has announced right before the national championship game, to Jackson's delight. Don't know if you're still here, Jackson, but if you are, I know you are very happy about the fact that Nate Oates is not leaving Alabama. That is awesome news for the Crimson Tide. They gave him a contract extension for him to not take the Michigan job, because we know Michigan was interested in Nate Oates, but Alabama gave him a hefty contract extension, and I'm sure Kentucky definitely would have been interested in Nate Oates, but Nate Oates is staying with Alabama. That is awesome news for the Crimson Tide in their quest to continue to be a strong basketball school as well as a football school. But then you got these other candidates that are still available here: Scott Drew, Dan Hurley, Billy Donovan. If Dan Hurley left UConn for Kentucky, I'm telling you, man, a lot of UConn fans will be furious. I know, especially if UConn wins, they're always going to love Dan Hurley for the fact that he got him 2 national titles if they can win tonight, but they're not going to like it if he leaves for Kentucky. Because I know a lot of UConn fans are going to be like, well, we're a better job now than Kentucky. But in essence, is that true? I think Kentucky's still a step up. They got a bigger fan base. They got a lot of money, deep pockets, but the job's been elevated right back to where Jim Calhoun had it, if not more so right now. The fan interest is at an all-time high. And I think that Dan Hurley, it might be wise for him to stay at UConn. He's got things rolling there, and he can continue to keep them rolling. And the pressure's less, I guess you would say. I know it's crazy, but the pressure is less than it is at Kentucky. So I don't know. I think Dan Hurley, unless Kentucky offers him more money than UConn's going to offer him, I think he stays at UConn, but you never know. It would be the ultimate hurt, though, for the Huskies if he leaves. It would be so painful, but I just don't see it happening. Scott Drew, I don't see that happening either, because Scott Drew, I think he'll stay at Baylor. I could be wrong on that, but I feel like he'll stay at Baylor. Yes, you could say he's done all he possibly could there, but I mean, Baylor's built a new facility, a new stadium, won a title there. I mean, they're going to build a statue of the guy outside the place for all he's done at Baylor, especially if he continues to coach there. And I just don't know if it'd be advantageous for him to leave the job that he's at, where, I mean, he's going to be revered forever. And if he goes to Kentucky, they expect so much. And if Scott Drew doesn't meet those expectations, he's just going to be another coach that basically gets the axe. It doesn't make any sense to me. Billy Donovan, that makes sense. I don't know why it does, but because I know Billy Donovan's been out of the college game for a while. He hasn't been coaching in college basketball for like a decade, basically. He was at Florida, won the 2 titles, but Billy Donovan, I know that he's not doing all that well at the Bulls right now, but the NBA is a completely different game. If you don't have the talent, you're not going to win a lot of games. And I believe that the Bulls might not have enough talent. He also coached at the Thunder. But Billy Donovan, to me, in a weird way, would be a good fit. I don't know why it would be, but I just think it would. People are saying Brad Underwood of Illinois. I think that wouldn't be a bad hire either. I mean, he is a little bit older, but he's also a guy that's coached for a while. He's built up a program in Illinois that's had success in the past, but it's been struggling for a while. I don't really think that would be a bad hire. I just really don't. Brad Underwood is a name to watch. And there's obviously other names. This coaching search is going to be crazy. I'll definitely cover it, whatever happens. Whoever Kentucky hires, definitely will either make a video, maybe go live for it. I'm not 100% sure. Depends on how much time I probably have when the news is announced, but I definitely will at least make a video on it because it is massive news. But when Calipari was announced that he was going to Arkansas, had to have an emergency live. That was a crazy show. That was a lot of fun. But Humacero said, yeah, it was probably a foul before the top. For sure. I can't believe they didn't call a foul, and that's crazy. Humacero also says, not the finish that Purdue needed, but they are still keeping it close. I mean, they're keeping it close enough where they're not in ultimate danger zone mode, but it's still not a great sign. They needed to be either tied or down by a couple. This isn't ideal. It's not all she wrote for Purdue, but UConn can easily go on a quick 10-0 run to start the second half, and then Purdue's done. So we'll have to see. It's going to be very interesting. Can't wait for the second half. And what's the final college basketball game of the season. Can't believe we're done. Women's basketball is over. Now men's basketball is going to be over. We still got the NBA, and I'll be covering that as well. I'll probably do some live streams for that. The NBA is fun, but it's not March Madness. It's definitely not March Madness. Hamasiro, the lawyer, is MIA tonight. It seems he better get it going in the second half. It's required. It is absolutely required for Fletcher Loyer to have a better second half for Purdue to win. There's no way that if he doesn't at least score like 8 to 10 points in the second half, that Purdue can win. I don't see it, especially because Lance Jones isn't getting it going either. Both those guys need to contribute. Hamasiro says Jay Wright isn't chasing a paycheck. He had things rolling at Villanova. He retired because he didn't want to do it anymore. However, maybe after another year or two, he gets the itch to coach again. I mean, you could be right, and that's where I could be wrong. I could be wrong on that, Hamasiro, but I believe that he's not going to coach again at all. That's my belief because he left that job at Villanova. Had a school in Villanova that was not really ever considered any more than a solid program into basically almost a fringe blue blood. I mean, no one was really saying it, but Villanova was entering the conversation. That's how good of a job Jay Wright was doing at Villanova. Won those 2 national titles. Now Villanova has 3 titles overall, but he left the job doing that well. And he declined other jobs in the past. And to me, I just don't see Jay Wright rejoining a team to be their head coach, whatever job it may be, especially if he's not going to take the Kentucky job. I just don't see it. Like you said, he could get the itch. You could be right, Hamasiro. He absolutely could get the itch, but I don't see it. But I could be wrong. But he's definitely not chasing a paycheck, and that's admirable because a lot of people, unfortunately, and I'm not saying it's wrong because, I mean, that's the nature of the business, right? I mean, you want to be able to make a lot of money. That's what you're doing as a coach. I mean, you're not just coaching not to make a paycheck. You want to be able to have a lot of success, win a lot of games, have great teams, create a lot of memories, and make a lot of money in the process. But some coaches aren't out for that. Some coaches will stay at their current job and not take that bigger job. A lot of them do that. I mean, you look at a guy like Kyle Whittingham in college football. Yeah, he's making a good amount of money, but he probably could have gotten a bigger job than Utah, but he stayed at Utah. Some coaches are like that. Other coaches, they want to go to that top destination where they can win and win national titles and have all the talent and in the limelight and the fans and everything. But other coaches, they don't. They're content with the school that gave them their chance, and they want to build that legacy at a lesser school and have as much success as they possibly can, and that's how you make a name for yourself. So every coach has different priorities, and it's crazy how that works. Hamasiro says Kentucky should get Mark Pope. He's doing great at BYU. He's pretty young, and he's a Kentucky guy who knows the culture and pressure in Lexington. I mean, it's an interesting suggestion, Hamasiro, for sure, because a lot of people were making that suggestion on last night's live stream when we were talking about Calipari. But, I mean, a lot of people saying Mark Pope, and I think it's mostly because of the fact that he is a Kentucky guy. It's because of that tie-in of why they think Mark Pope would work. The only thing I don't know about is that he is, religious and stuff like that. BYU and the school, it fits for him in that regard. Maybe that doesn't matter to him. Maybe going to Kentucky would be fine. I don't know. But I do think maybe that could be at play because I know BYU, I mean, it's a different type of school than other schools around, college athletics. And that maybe could be, a detractant for him to possibly go to a school like Kentucky. But it would be, an alma mater for him. He might, if they offered it to him, maybe he would take the job. But I think there are possibly, at least 3 or 4 other candidates that if those guys ahead of Mark Pope don't turn it down, then Mark Pope's not an option. Now, if guys like Brad Underwood, Scott Drew, all those guys decline Dan Hurley, and then you can maybe start reaching into the Mark Pope area where it's like, well, what are we going to do, Kentucky? It's like, well, we got a guy, Mark Pope, who is, played at Kentucky and all that. It would kind of make sense maybe by then. But there are better candidates than him. But it is an interesting point, Hummus, here. It's definitely an interesting point. I think there is some viability to that, and I don't think he would be the worst hire in the world. But I do know that some Kentucky fans, they would think of it as a bad hire because he's had a lot of seasons at BYU where they weren't all that good. Now, yes, they had a really good season this year in the first season of the Big 12, which is crazy because I thought BYU football, with how well they've been under Kalani Sitake, that they would have a pretty good season overall in the first year of the Big 12 in football. I thought maybe they'd go like 8-4, maybe 7-5, but no, they didn't even go 500. And then you look at BYU basketball. I thought with all the teams in the Big 12, like Kansas and Baylor and all that, and Houston coming in, I thought they would struggle, but they were very competitive, won a lot of games. They ended up being a 6 seed in March Madness, even though they didn't advance. But BYU had a really good season. They played a lot better than I thought that they were. So he's an option. But it's going to be really interesting. Like I said, definitely keep monitoring that situation. But all I know is that UConn fans they just don't want Dan Hurley leaving UConn. Just like Alabama fans didn't want Nate Oates leaving. But now we know Nate Oates is staying. The contract extension, plus he wants to build a culture at Alabama. He wants Alabama to win a national championship, and maybe he can get it done. If he stays at Alabama for many more years, maybe he can get it done. It's crazy about his story, how he went from a guy that 11 years ago was coaching a high school team. Then he eventually found his way at Buffalo, now at Alabama. It's very impressive stuff with Nate Oates. And it's awesome for Alabama to have him. Hummus Hero says, I agree. I definitely would have bet BYU football to have better success in year one than basketball. It's crazy. I mean, absolutely. Like, I'm sure there's a few people that would have said, I think BYU basketball is going to do better. But I feel like probably 85 to 90% of people would have been like, between the two, they would have thought BYU football would have done better. It's wild, especially because BYU football, like, historically has had more success. I know the basketball team has had success, but it's just crazy how that happened. But definitely Mark Pope, name to watch, but there's other names that are higher on the list. But UConn and Purdue, the second half of this game is going to be interesting. I feel like the game has kind of gone how I thought it was going to go, except that Purdue's rotational players are playing worse than I thought they were going to play. They're not getting the job done. UConn, it's been a balanced attack. They're always balanced. That's why they're so dangerous. They have so many different guys that can score. But for Purdue, it's Zach Edey, then Braid Smith, then who else? And that's just how it's going, and that's not sustainable. I know Purdue's going to have to get more production from the other guys. And Fletcher Lawyer, he's had tendency to disappear in games, in big games. He has. And if he disappears and he doesn't play well in the second half and he overall just doesn't have a good game, it's going to be hard for Purdue to win. And it's going to validate why so many people picked UConn to win. Even though for my live stream, a lot of people in the poll, they picked Purdue to win, even though the poll has evened up to 50-50, probably helps the way UConn's playing. Appreciate you guys for participating in the poll. But definitely, UConn, they were my pick to win it all. They've been by far the most dominant team in college basketball the last couple of years. It just kind of made sense to pick them to win. Downtown MB appreciates you for being here. He says, Juwan Howard has the Kentucky job in the bag. I don't know why it's even in question. How? That has to be a joke. I think you have to be joking in that department because Juwan Howard just got fired, right? I mean, Michigan fired him. I mean, he wasn't getting the job done. A lot of his success was because of John Beilein's players, kind of like how Kevin Ollie had success because of Jim Calhoun's players. A lot of coaches do that. I mean, Mike Davis at Indiana after Bob Knight. How many coaches have success early on because of their predecessor, and then they fall apart? I don't think that there's no way that's happened. I don't think there's any viability to that. But, I mean, you never know. A downtown MB. Stranger things have happened. I never would have thought Cal would have left Kentucky for Arkansas, so anything's possible. But, I mean, I don't bet, but if I did bet, I would definitely bet money that Juwan Howard is not going to go to be the Kentucky head coach. There's no way. They wouldn't even offer it to him. Absolutely not. But it's an interesting thing to talk about. Sports Talk with Austin coming back saying, so Jeffrey, is Taylor Swift going to sing the halftime show while we wait, laughing out loud? Well, I mean, I'm not really paying attention to what's going on with the halftime show. You know, just talking about what's going on around college basketball right now. Appreciate everybody for being here. Like the stream down below. Subscribe to the channel if you guys are new. Really helps the channel out. Share the stream out on social media. But most importantly, I do appreciate you guys for being here. And I can't wait for the second half. Hope it's a classic. Hope it goes down to the wire. But UConn in control right now. But no, Austin, I don't think Taylor Swift is going to sing it. And, I mean, some people would like that. The Swifties would like it. Certain people would like that. But I don't know. I don't really see the appeal there to me. Like, I don't really know. Hummus Hero says, no chance Juwan is going to fight Logan Paul in an MMA match now that he's free from coaching basketball. Well, I mean, that's hilarious. Obviously, we know Juwan Howard had the incident with the Wisconsin assistant that, I mean, people are still talking about that. I mean, that was not a good look for Juwan Howard. A lot of coaches would have been fired if they did that. Juwan Howard, his alma mater. He got very lucky that they didn't get rid of him. Very lucky after that incident. But then they ended up getting rid of him after that in the first place because of the fact that he wasn't winning. And it sucks to fire a guy that's from your alma mater. It really does. You never want to do it. I mean, they didn't want to fire Patrick Ewing in Georgetown. They didn't want to fire a lot of coaches at their alma mater. It's just, it is what it is. If you're not winning, you're not going to get it done. Yeah, I had a feeling it was a joke downtown. I had a feeling it was a joke. Some people are that gullible. Some people are that gullible where it's like, are you being serious? I can't believe you would suggest such a thing. But I had a feeling it was a joke. Like, I knew you weren't being serious. But appreciate the clarification. But I had a feeling. You also say I'm excited for Dusty May at Michigan, though. And you should be. Absolutely. Dusty May, I will say the only thing I'm worried about is that a lot of people are pegging Dusty May as an elite coach already because of the fact that he went to the Final Four. And they were only one play away from not ever even advancing out of the round of 64 that year. They barely beat Memphis. I know that they did win, but then they beat Fairleigh Dickinson. Should have had Purdue, but, Purdue blew it last year. But I just think that maybe he's getting a little bit too much credit for that, but his team, it was still very impressive. But I think Dusty May, with more talent, more resources at Michigan, he's going to do fine. I don't know if it's going to be like automatically like Michigan's suddenly going to be top 2 or top 3 in the Big Ten. It might take a little bit, but I think he will have success. And I'm happy for Michigan fans that they got their guy. Sports Talk with Austin says, Taylor Swift is the only top sports channel as a halftime special. Yeah, Taylor Swift, I mean, like I said, no, I mean, some people, the Swifties, they love Taylor Swift. They really, really do. But then other people don't. I mean, I don't really either way. I mean, I know that a lot of people would not like that. A lot of people would, but I mean, I don't think that's going to happen anyway. Taylor Swift probably has more important things to do than that. But I do appreciate it, Austin. That is absolutely hilarious. Steven Cherry, appreciate you for being here. He says, heard Calipari was interested in the Ohio State job prior to taking the Arkansas gig. I haven't seen that. Haven't actually looked at Twitter that much today. But I wouldn't doubt it, especially because it kind of seems like it's true that Calipari wanted out and like it was kind of mutual. But especially with the Tyson, billionaires down there at Arkansas and him knowing him, kind of being buddies with him and stuff like that, it kind of makes sense why he went to Arkansas. But maybe, I mean, Arkansas is probably a better job in Ohio State in basketball. I mean, Ohio State's way better in football, but I could see him being interested in that job if he was really desperate to leave. But that's really interesting, Stephen Cherry. Thanks for the update on that and appreciate you for being here. And there is a foul on Clingan. Second half is back on. We got 19:44 left of the entire college basketball season. Can't believe it's almost over. We got to cherish it while we got it. Cannot wait for the rest of the second half. But Purdue with the ball, down 6. They need a bucket. And they're going to their bread and butter and Zach Edey, and he misses the shot. Donovan Clingan with a man's board right there. That was a fantastic rebound, shielding his body from Edey. Cam Spencer in the mid-range. He misses the shot. Clingan with the board. Kicks to Tristan Newton. And Tristan Newton knocks down that 3. And just like that, that's why UConn didn't need to be up by even 6 at the half, because now they're up by 9. And Purdue, they cannot fall behind by too much more than this, or they might be donezo. They just cannot fall behind by 12 or 15. They're in a lot of danger right now. Fletcher Lawyer, who's been very quiet. Lance Jones as well. Jones almost with a turnover. He does dive on the floor to save it. Still almost a turnover, but Braden Smith ends up with it. He lays it in, but it's a foul before the shot. I mean, Purdue's hustling. You got to give Purdue credit. It's not like they're not playing hard. They're playing well, but UConn's just playing better. That's how good of a team that they are. They almost make it look easy at times, which is crazy. But good effort by Lance Jones to save that ball after he almost turned it over. 18:50 to go in the second half. Braden Smith, crossover dribble. Tristan Newton on him, driving in. Now Castle switched over, trying to go up on it. Kicks to Edey. Edey down low, and he misses a point-blank shot. Cam Spencer down the floor. Huskies can go up by double digits. Tristan Newton, crossover dribble, takes a step back 3, and it's in and out. Lance Jones with a really good rebound there between 2 defenders. Almost another turnover by Lance Jones, but Braden Smith, 5-on-4, kicks to Trey Kaufman-Renn. That's a good play by Trey Kaufman-Renn. Wait for your defender to blow by, then lay it in. 39-32, 18-10 to go in the second half. Tristan Newton over to Cam Spencer. Stephon Castle to Alex Caravan. This starting five for UConn has been elite all season long. Clingan with the ball. 18 to go in the second half to Stephon Castle, who's been fantastic in the mid-range. His shot's off the mark. Lance Jones with the board. Lance Jones is doing a really good job on the glass in the last few possessions here. Braden Smith gets a screen from Edey, takes a mid-range jumper. It's really tough. Almost got it to fall, but it is in and out. Cam Spencer back the other way. UConn up by 7. Make it 9. Stephon Castle with a really athletic layup. 41-32. 9-point lead for the Huskies yet again. And Purdue's fans, they're looking worried. Not as loud as they were before. UConn fans on their feet. Braden Smith to Trey Kaufman-Renn, and they call an offensive foul on Purdue. Is this where the game's going to get away from the Boilermakers? Matt Painter, he's looking concerned. UConn with the ball, bringing it up. Tristan Newton, one of the best point guards in college basketball, kicks to Cam Spencer. Alex Caravan, top of the key. UConn just going through the motions right now. Cam Spencer kicks in the corner to Tristan Newton for a triple, and it's off the mark. Clingan trying to get that rebound, and it ends up in UConn's hands. Up the floor, Castle driving in, and they call a blocking foul on Lance Jones. That's his third foul. Lance Jones tried to draw a charge, but he couldn't get set in front of Stephon Castle. And that's a really good play by the freshman. Stephon Castle knew that if he went to the side, that he could get Lance Jones to lean a bit. You can argue that it could have been a charge, but I think Castle went to the side just at the last second. I don't know. Hummus Hero saying it was a charge. I think maybe you could go either way. He did kind of move over, but that is a tough call. Hummus Hero says he was completely set. I mean, that's a tough call for Purdue. That's all you can say. Whether it's a foul or not, the refs called it a foul, and that's just one of those plays that for Lance Jones, you got 2 fouls. You just don't want to pick up a third there. I do agree that there is an argument that it could have been a charge, but it is what it is. Purdue already down by 9. They need something to go their way in a hurry. They can't fall behind by any more. 16:55 to go in the second half. Stephon Castle, though, he hasn't made too many mistakes tonight, but he just missed both the free throws, so it ended up not being too bad for Purdue. UConn didn't get any points out of it. Braden Smith driving in, kicking the lawyer. He's been quiet still. Edey down low, misses the shot. Oh, my goodness. Camden Heide with the putback slam. I mean, he's a guy that averages like 2.5 points or something like that, maybe 3 points per game. And he just probably did a SportsCenter top 10 play in the national championship game. What a play. Maybe that will give Purdue some juice. That was an incredible dunk. Cam Spencer off the dribble, trying to go up with a mid-range shot. Misses it. Caravan almost got the rebound, but kicks it to Castle. Castle gets it back, and he lays it in. Purdue just can't catch a break, though. Every single time that they cut it a little bit, UConn extends the lead back out. Still a 9-point game. They can't fall behind by any more. Mason Gillis, who's also been quiet in this game, kicks to Edey down low. His shot's off the mark, and they're going to call a foul on Donovan Clingan. He does not like the call. What a dunk by Camden Heide, though. Clingan trying to go for that rebound, and he just palms it with one hand and flushes it home. That's an incredible play. What a display of athleticism from a guy that most people outside of Purdue fans and maybe some Big Ten fans, like they don't even know who this guy is. If you're not a Purdue fan, you've probably never heard of Camden Heide. I mean, I've heard of him because I've watched Purdue this season, and I watched the Big Ten a decent amount, so I've seen him before. But a lot of fans of college basketball watching this game have no idea who he is. What a dunk. I mean, that is crazy. Hummus Hero says that tip dunk was elite. I mean, they got to let that play spark them, though. I mean, I think overall they are playing hard. I have no issue with their effort, but it just feels like overall, like UConn's having to not work as hard to have the success that they are. Purdue, like they're having to do a lot of hard work to get these shots off. UConn's made a couple tough shots, but like Tristan Newton, a couple of his outside shots, Cam Spencer an outside shot. I don't know. It's just they're able to like effortlessly score at times. Purdue, they're having to work for it. And that's tough to sustain for 40 minutes. Hummus Hero said, did Dominique Wilkins just put on a Heidi mask? I mean, that's a great comparison. I've seen Dominique Wilkins, his dunks in the past in the slam dunk contest. I have seen his highlights on YouTube. Man, he was a guy that he was a little bit on the shorter side, but he had springs. He could dunk. And, yeah, he had the form, too. So that's a good one, Hummus here. I definitely see the comparison. But maybe that will get Camden Heidi to really start, playing at a high level. Maybe he can fill in for what Fletcher Lawyer and Lance Jones aren't providing. Because sometimes you'll have a guy out of nowhere that you're just not expecting to contribute. Sometimes that guy shows up in the biggest moment. I mean, Remy Martin was a way better player than Camden Heidi, or he performed anyway at a higher level. But when he came from Arizona State over to Kansas, he wasn't even playing that much for Kansas, and then he ended up being the hero for the Jayhawks in their 2022 National Championship win. If Remy Martin was not on that team, Carolina wins that game. Carolina would have won, but Remy Martin, every time Kansas needed a big shot, he made a big shot, and he was not a guy that really did all that much for Kansas that season. So maybe Camden Heidi can be that guy. I mean, again, he's not a guy that really anybody expects much from, but, if I was playing out there and I just made that dunk, I'd be pumped and jazzed up for the rest of the game. I would be anyway because it's the championship game, but that would really get me into overdrive. But Purdue, though, other than that massive dunk, they just haven't had a lot go right in the last few minutes. Their offense is kind of dried up, and UConn, they're starting to have their way. They haven't blown this thing open to oblivion yet like they did against Illinois, because when they made that big run, I knew the game was already over. There was 15 minutes left, and I'm like, the game's done. Illinois is not coming back. If UConn gets up to 52-34, if they're up by 18 points, Purdue's not coming back. I just don't see it. Purdue is just not the kind of team that can come back against a team like UConn. They could against an inferior team, but I just don't think with UConn. So Edey, they need a bucket right here. He's being double teamed, though. UConn has been harassing him all game. Edey outside, kick into Camden Heidi, and it's over and back. Turnover for Purdue, and they cannot have that. That's not what they need. And you can tell Matt Painter's getting frustrated. That's the right play by Zach Edey, having to pass it out. He's being doubled, but the pass was a little high. But Camden Heidi also just kind of mishandled that. He probably should not have let that go through his hands, but it is what it is for Purdue. Tristan Newton at the top of the key. Huskies up 9, in control. A bucket here, and things really get dicey for Purdue. Cam Spencer off the mark. But then the ball goes out of bounds off of Braden Smith. What a play by Tristan Newton, not allowing Braden Smith to get that basketball. So the ball will remain with the Huskies. Stephon Castle, kick into Samson Johnson, over to Newton. Newton driving into Johnson for the dunk. What an alley-oop. It's not clinging, but it works all the same with Samson Johnson. One of UConn's better bench players, 45-34, an 11-point lead for UConn. Zach Edey kicks to Camden Heidi, over to Fletcher Lawyer, who's been still very quiet. Braden Smith to Mason Gillis. His three is off the mark, and this is the absolute worst time for Purdue to go cold from three. Purdue has been a really good three-point shooting team this season, and that's what people have said Purdue had to have if the Boilermakers were going to be a national title team. They needed to be able to shoot threes at a much higher rate than they did last season because they struggled from three. That's why they lost to Fairleigh Dickinson. But this season, Purdue has done so much better from three. But unfortunately, in this game, Purdue is not shooting well from the outside, and that might come back to bite them. UConn is shooting a whole lot better from outside. Purdue needs to probably hit 5 or 6 threes in the second half to have a shot to come back here. Tristan Newton driving in, kicks to Samson Johnson again, and it's literally the exact same play, but on the opposite side of the court. UConn now up by 13. I think Purdue needs a timeout. Matt Painter's not calling it. He trusts his team, but I think Purdue needs a timeout. UConn's got 11 bench points. Purdue only has 2. And it was that ferocious dunk by Camden Heidi, but that dunk's not going to help them win this game. They need points. Edey down low, and there is a foul to stop the bleeding. Purdue going to the line. Hummus Hero said UConn just slowly strangles great teams, and average and good teams they just obliterate from the get-go. Absolutely. That's a fantastic assessment. I mean, if you're not a very good team, UConn's just going to destroy you. There's no chance. You're not even going to be able to keep it within probably like 15 points by half or like early second half. Alabama did good. I mean, I know Alabama ended up losing by 14, but Alabama was very competitive with UConn all the way to around 5 minutes left in the game. They legitimately still had a chance to win with 5 minutes left. And that's why you got to give Alabama credit. Purdue, they're already starting to fade right now. I mean, they're not done yet. There's still a lot of time. There's over 14 minutes to go. But Purdue's in much worse shape at this stage of the game than Alabama was in the Final Four. And Alabama still ultimately ended up losing by a pretty hefty amount. So that's a fantastic assessment, Hummus Hero. But definitely Zach Edey and the Boilers are hoping that this will be an anomaly and that Purdue can find a way to come back. And it does help that there was a lane violation on the Huskies. Gave Zach Edey another free throw, so he went 2 for 3 there. It's 47-36. Purdue cuts it to 11. Samson Johnson with 3 fouls for UConn. Dan Hurley leaving him in, though, because he knows he doesn't have to bring Clingan in just yet. But a missed 3 for the Huskies, but another offensive rebound for UConn. Almost another offensive rebound, fighting on the floor for it. I think there's a tie up, and it's UConn with the possession arrow. UConn just out hustling. They got so much athleticism. And Purdue, even though they got Zach Edey, they're still struggling to get a rebound. You can't have that against UConn. You cannot give the Huskies multiple chances to score on a possession. You got to let them be 1 and out. Shoot a shot, get the rebound. Can't give them multiple chances. Cam Spencer left wide open for 3. His shot's off the mark, but I think they called this time a foul on UConn, probably an illegal screen. That's a good break for Purdue. So Purdue will be inbound in the basketball with a chance to get this game back under 10. And on cue, Dan Hurley brings in Donovan Clingan, who has 3 fouls. That's why he took him out. Samson Johnson now has 4. He picked up his 4, which is not a good foul on him. He should not have done that illegal screen. But Clingan cannot pick up another foul, or it could be tough. Could be tough for the Huskies because then Zach Edey could dominate a little bit more. And I think they just called a goaltend. I think they called a goaltend on Donovan Clingan. Zach Edey was going for a putback slam. Yep, his hand was in the net. That's a very good call by the referees. His hand was in the net, and Purdue cuts it to 9 points. Thankfully for UConn, they didn't call the 4th foul on Clingan. That would have been even worse. Zach Edey with 20 points and 6 boards. He's doing his job, but he needs his teammates to step up. Stephon Castle, top of the key, looking for somebody to get the ball to, finds the big man Clingan. Over to Tristan Newton, driving in, kicks over to Caravan, to Cam Spencer, who's a maestro in the middle, and he takes it inside off the glass. 49-38, what a layup by Cam Spencer, just a heady player. One of the most consistent players in college basketball. 13 minutes to go in the national championship game. UConn leads by 11. Crossover dribble. Braden Smith. Stephon Castle on him. Now Zach Edey. Be a double team. Almost loses the ball, but they call a foul on the play. Might have been on Cam Spencer for trying to reach in there. I think even though Zach Edey has scored 20 points, I still feel like UConn's guarded him pretty well. They've doubled at timely moments. And they've recovered very well on the shooters, even when they've doubled. And Purdue's just not shooting very well from the outside, which has been their major flaw in this game. And one of their biggest strengths on the entire season, which has helped get them here. Braden Smith to Mason Gillis inside to Edey, going up with it. Clingan did not foul. And there is an awesome rebound by Cam Spencer and a foul on Purdue. UConn's got 6 fouls. Purdue now up to 5 fouls on the half. But Mason Gillis trying to go for that rebound, and that's definitely a foul. Hit him right in the back. I mean, he didn't mean to. He's just trying to go for the ball. But what a rebound by Spencer, taking all of that contact. And Clingan's like, yep, I went straight up. That's why I didn't get my 4th foul. UConn doing all the right things right now with an 11-point lead. Chance to grow it even further. 12:20 to go in the second half. Purdue at a crossroads, running out of time. Clingan kicks to Hassan Jara. Back to Cam Spencer. Spencer gets the screen from Clingan over to Caravan, who's been kind of quiet in this game, but UConn hasn't needed his production. Tristan Newton driving inside to the rim. Somehow lays it in. I have no idea how he got that shot up over Edey, but he did, and he didn't even go glass. What a play. Purdue was 13 of 28 shooting in the first half, but only 3 of 10 in the second half. Their shooting has gone cold. Miles Colvin in the game. Matt Painter trying to find a spark from him. Zach Edey getting doubled yet again. Kicks to Heidi. Over to Colvin for 3. His shot's way off the mark. Purdue is struggling from the outside. 11:30 to go in the second half. Hassan Jar over to Alex Caravan. His 3's off the mark. Edey with the board. And I think they might have called a foul on UConn. I'm not 100% sure, but I think they did on Cam Spencer. Very smart by Dan Hurley. Dan Hurley likes to erupt, but he kind of told Cam Spencer to calm down there. Didn't want him to get a technical for going crazy. But UConn in command, up by 13. And I think there's about probably 4 or 5 more minutes in this game where Purdue can be down by this much and still have a shot. If they're down by 13 with like 6 minutes left, I think it's over. They have to find a way to cut this under 10 in the next couple minutes. But like you said, Hummus, here, UConn style play, it just doesn't work all that well when you're trying to come back. Jackson says, if you love hearing hot takes on college football, NFL, college basketball, and NBA, check out Only Talk Sports on these links on X and Rumble. Appreciate that. Jackson, definitely over on Twitter/X. I post every single day on there, usually if I can, on various topics around the college sports world and NFL and NBA. If you want to go check me out over there on Twitter, I would really appreciate it. And I also have a Rumble channel where I put my live streams on there. I also put my videos over there. If you'd like to go check that out, would really appreciate it. Give me a follow over there. But most importantly, I do appreciate you guys for being here. And if you guys are new, subscribe to the channel. Really helps out the channel. We're trying to get to 2,500. We're getting closer and closer, all because of your guys' support. It's been awesome and fantastic, and I really appreciate it. Share the stream out on social media as well and hit that like button. Definitely helps out the stream, but I really appreciate all your guys' support. Appreciate the shout-out, Jackson. Hummus Hero says, well, only 2 teams will be able to say they beat 2 of the teams in the Final Four. Looking like UConn will be the obvious one. Anyone know who the other is? And Jackson said Ohio State is the other one. They beat Alabama and they beat Purdue. Jackson did a good job there. I would have had to have thought about that one, but I could have come up with it. I could have remembered that it was Ohio State. But that's a good job, Jackson. That's a good job. It would have taken me a minute. That's a good question, Hummus here. I love the question. Love the trivia. But Jackson, he's always spot on with that. And then Hummus here said, yeah, and they failed to even make the tournament. The only thing, to be fair, is that quite possibly Ohio State, if they had Jake Diebler as the coach longer during the season, they might have made the tournament. I mean, they fired Chris Holtman. When Jake Diebler became the interim head coach, he turned Ohio State around and gave them a shot. They were this close to making the tournament, but they fell short at the end. But, yeah, I mean, Ohio State wasn't a terrible team. But, unfortunately, just they did not do well with Chris Holtman overall. Did a lot better with Diebler. Jackson says they'll make the tournament next year. That's for sure. Jake Diebler will do a tremendous job at Ohio State. It seems so. I mean, I wouldn't see him doing that great of a job as the interim coach and then becoming the head coach, and then he fails. I mean, that wouldn't really make a whole lot of sense. But I definitely think that Jake Diebler should succeed. It's going to be tough, though. There's a lot of competition. I mean, look, Eric Musselman going to USC. You got Dusty May now at Michigan. I mean, Tom Izzo's still at Michigan State. There's a lot of competition in the Big Ten. Indiana's trying to find their footing. Brad Underwood's still at Illinois. Unless maybe he takes the Kentucky job, we'll have to see. But I do think Diebler can have success. Jackson says, let's also help Only Talk Sports get to 2,500 subs. Really appreciate that, Jackson. Really do. Hopefully we can get there. Hummus Hero says, I hope so, Jackson. There is no reason Ohio State shouldn't make the tournament at a minimum. Holtman really wasted getting it done, especially with all the talent that they had. I mean, he was bringing in talent. Malachi Branham, they had E.J. Liddell. A lot of talented players, guys playing in the NBA. It's just, unfortunately, they just couldn't get it done. And if you underperform, even at a school like Ohio State that's more known for football, but they do care about basketball and they have had success in the past, you're going to get the boot, and that's what happened to Holtman. So hopefully Ohio State basketball will start doing better. But Cam Spencer, he has 3 fouls. UConn definitely in more foul trouble than Purdue, but it hasn't affected them yet. Hassan Jara with the basketball being hounded by Braden Smith, almost a turnover. Both teams diving on the floor, and Zach Edey ends up with it. Great hustle play by Purdue. They need more plays like that. Lance Jones driving into the lane, trying to find Edey. He does find Edey. Klingon guard him. Klingon cannot pick up that 4th. And did they call a foul on Klingon? I'm not sure. Did they call a travel on Edey or a foul on Klingon? 11 to go in the second half. If that's Klingon's fourth, that's massive. I can't tell, though. Edey was driving in. Klingon did jump just a little bit. I don't know. It's close. I think they called a travel. They called a travel. So definitely Klingon lucky not to pick up his fourth. It was a travel on Edey. Looks like he shuffled his feet a little bit. 10:40 to go in the second half. Purdue is definitely running out of time. They've been stuck at 38 points for the last couple minutes. Stephon Castle driving in, misses the shot. I will say Purdue's done a good job preventing UConn from scoring a lot, but it's not going to matter if Purdue can't score themselves. UConn just missed a three, so Purdue's getting yet another chance. Braden Smith going down the floor. I mean, it's been almost 30 minutes in this game, and Purdue has not even cracked 40. That's just not going to get it done. There is a foul on the floor on UConn, but there's been no field goals for Purdue in the last 3 minutes and 18 seconds. This little stretch here is going to end up being the cause of Purdue losing this game. They've gone way too long without scoring. I mean, I understand it hasn't been like a 5-6 minute drought, but still, you can't have stretches like this in the national championship game against a team like UConn that's so dominant. I mean, like I said, they're very lucky to still be in the game. UConn could have already blown this thing open already by now, but they're hanging around still. But I just feel like in the next few possessions, UConn is going to blow this thing open. Braden Smith stops the bleeding a little bit, knocks down both free throws, so it's 51-40. Cam Spencer with 3 fouls, Hassan Jara with 3, Klingon with 3, and Samson Johnson with 4 fouls. Like I said, those fouls might not matter if UConn builds up a big enough lead. Tristan Newton with the basketball to Hassan Jara. Jara top of the key. Driving in, kicks to Stephon Castle to Tristan Newton. He's a really good three-point shooter. Will he take the shot? He loses the basketball, kicks to Caravan with 4 on the shot clock, and he knocks down the 3. Unbelievable pass by Tristan Newton. Good shot by Caravan. 54-40, 14-point lead for UConn, largest of the game. NCAA tournament so far for Purdue, they've hit 8 threes per game. Tonight, they've got 1. That's going to lose you a game every time. And Lawyer with a terrible shot. He has been MIA, just like you said, Hummus Hero. And down the floor, Hassan Jara laying it in. Timeout, Purdue. This game's almost over. It's not over yet. I'm not going to say it's over, but it's getting to that point. 56-40. UConn starting to make that run. I know Matt Painter didn't want to call a timeout, trying to let his team play through it. And you don't want to use all your timeouts, but you almost feel like maybe he took a little bit too long to use it. Jackson says, yeah, the Buckeyes beat Bama 92-81 on November 24th, and they beat Purdue 73-69 on February 18th. That's crazy. For sure. Hummus Hero also said Purdue has 4 field goals this half. That's not going to get it done. And he said, oh, it's over, laughing out loud. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much over. I think it already is. I mean, could they come back? Maybe. I mean, maybe. But they're down 16 to a team in UConn that doesn't allow teams usually to get back in games once they get big leads. I don't know. Purdue is not making shots. I mean, like, they've even had pretty good looks at times. Like, some of their shots have been contested. I'm not going to act like they've just missed wide open shots and they've just been awful tonight. But some of these shots for Purdue have been pretty open, and they're just not making them. Miles Colvin had a really open 3 in the corner that he missed. Lawyer's been way off. Lance Jones, he did get in foul trouble, but he has not had a good game. I mean, you talk about Lance Jones and Fletcher Lawyer, 2 guys that both average 11 points per game for Purdue this season. And I don't think Lawyer scored. If he has, I can't even remember. And I think Lance Jones is 2 points. So you take 2 guys that normally average, but combined between the two, 22 points per game. And tonight they have 2 points. So that's 20 points under what they normally do. And they're down 16. And to me, that spells the entire story. Because Zach Edey, he's done his job. It's like Caitlin Clark against South Carolina. She had 30 points. She played great. But Iowa couldn't get it done because Iowa didn't have enough other players scoring. And Purdue, Zach Edey's getting his points. Nobody's going to point to Edey and say, Edey's the reason they lost the game. Edey didn't do enough, which I'm sure there's somebody out there that would be insane enough to say, Edey should have done better. He should have had 40 points like he did earlier in the NCAA tournament. But it's not Edey's fault. I mean, you can't expect Edey to do that, especially when he's being guarded by Clingan, who, like, out of all the guys that Zach Edey's played against this season, is like the closest match to him. Like, blow for blow, pound for pound. Like, Clingan can actually go tit for tat with him. It's not a deal where, oh, you're being guarded by a 6'10 center. Clingan's 7'2", 280. Edey's 7'4", 300, and both have battled each other. And Edey's done better. He scored more. But it doesn't matter at the end of the day how much Edey scores if his teammates don't get it done. And ultimately, what I said in my short when I predicted UConn to win, I said that the backcourt was going to be the more important matchup to watch. And it's been absolutely accurate. There's no other way to describe it. UConn's backcourt's been better. So, just the way that it is. Purdue's backcourt has just played a lot poorer than UConn's, and that's going to ultimately cost them from getting their first national championship. And they've showed the Hurley family. They've been very successful as players and coaches, and UConn's been very successful as a program in the national title game. They're 5-0 in national title games. They got 5 titles, and every time they've been to a title game, they've won, which is crazy. They've never lost in the title game, and it doesn't look like they're going to do it tonight either. Zach Edey, down low, lays it in. Edey's still doing his part. Purdue cuts it to 14. Edey's still locked in and engaged, hoping he can help stymie a comeback here. But UConn is on a roll right now, and they show no signs of slowing down. Clingan with the ball. Over to Stephon Castle. Caravan back to Castle. 8:45 to go in the second half. Time running out on Purdue. UConn content to use the majority of the shot clock. Caravan kicking over to Stephon Castle for 3, and he knocks it down. UConn up by 17. They just continue to build the lead. Every single time that Purdue hits a shot, UConn does something even bigger. They hit a couple more shots. They knock down a big 3. Braden Smith in the mid-range. It's off the mark. Clingan with the rebound. Donovan Clingan, he's not scored as much as Edey, but he's definitely held his own. Tristan Newton with the basketball. Trying to drive, spin move. Gets cut off, kicks to Caravan. Over to Castle in the corner again, and his shot went in and out. Man, Purdue called a break. If that had gone in, UConn being up 20, it definitely would have been lights out. Miles Colvin with the ball, saving it from going out of bounds. Inside to Edey, and there is a foul. I don't know if it's on Clingan, but if it is, it's his 4th foul. So that's going to be tough for UConn to navigate with the fouls here. But like I said, for foul trouble to really matter, you need a competitive game. And this game isn't all that competitive right now. Stephen Cherry says Hurley's starting a dynasty at UConn. I mean, what else can you call it? If he stays at UConn, if he does not leave for the Kentucky job, which most people do not think that he will leave, if he does stay at UConn and he continues to coach the way that he is and has the ambitions that he has, and he continues to just have high IQ, basketball coaching ability out there, getting his guys to make these plays and bringing in the right players. I mean, we've even heard Dan Hurley say, I won't bring in a certain guy if I don't think he fits, even if he's a really talented player. So he brings in the guys he wants, guys that fits his system, that he knows are going to they're going to play the way that he wants them to play. And as long as he continues to innovate what he's doing and continue to improve, and he doesn't slack up like we've seen other coaches do in the past. A lot of coaches have success, but then they just kind of get complacent. You can't let complacency set in and be like, well, we've won a couple national titles. We've done everything, we can accomplish. We're good now. And then kind of start being mediocre. You got to keep having that drive. And if Dan Hurley continues to have that drive, and he stays at UConn and doesn't take any other job or goes to the NBA or does anything else, then I agree 110%, Stephen Cherry, that he's going to build a dynasty at UConn. I mean, I know in the age of NIL and the portal, it makes it tough. And I know there's going to be a lot of teams that can compete with money. But I don't think we've seen how dominant UConn has been the last 2 years. I don't really think we have seen this in a long time, if not ever, outside of like John Wooden and UCLA. But that was a completely different era. There weren't as many good teams back then, and the tournament was a whole lot smaller. But like the way UConn in this present age, people thought like dynasties would end. I mean, I know Alabama in football, like that was crazy with Saban. and winning all his titles. But, like, just the way UConn's looked, though, if this can continue, I mean, I know they're going to lose players. Kling is gone. Castle's gone. A couple other guys are probably going to be gone as well off this team. But, I mean, who knows? Maybe Dan Hurley can just continue to recruit. Maybe he can continue to bring guys in the portal. I don't know. But this team, it just looks unstoppable right now. Maybe they'll take a step back next year. But it's unbelievable how good UConn's been. I mean, they've been so dominant. I remember after the fallout of the Kevin Ollie experiment at UConn, and he wasn't having success after Jim Calhoun had to quit coaching because he was sick. And then Kevin Ollie was struggling. Dan Hurley took over, and at first things weren't all roses. Right? Sunshine and roses for UConn. I mean, they had some moments where they weren't all that great. People were like, is Dan Hurley the guy for the job? And people are like, is UConn fading away and they're no longer going to win games? Well, now they're the team right now. They're the team to beat in college basketball. Over Kentucky, over Kansas, over all these other teams, Carolina. It's insane. UConn is that team. They're not the best program of all time. They don't have the most championships all the time. But what Dan Hurley's doing, compound with what Jim Calhoun did, it's incredible what's going on with UConn. And Dan Hurley just has to keep that fire in him. 7:52 to go in the second half, and Zach Edey, he knocks down the first free throw. Purdue's got to hit all of their free throws the rest of the way. Can't miss any more if they're going to have any shot at coming back. And Edey does knock them both down. So it's 59-44. 7:50 to go in the second half. Klingon has 4 fouls. Maybe that will help Edey take over. Down the floor, Newton driving in to Samson Johnson, and he misses the potential alley-oop. That's a big break for Purdue. Right design play for UConn, but just couldn't get it to convert. Braden Smith kicking to Edey down low. Edey with the dunk. Purdue with back-to-back buckets. 59-46, cutting it to 13. They got to get it to under 10 in the next minute and a half. Purdue's still on the fringes of being in this game. Stephon Castle kicks to Caravan. Up the floor to Newton. UConn, do they look rattled? Not really. After the back-to-back buckets for Purdue. But we'll see if UConn starts to show some cracks a little bit. Samson Johnson with the ball. Kicks to Caravan. And nope, no cracks for UConn. Easy dunk for Caravan. Good pass by Samson Johnson. UConn back up by 15. 6:50 to go in the second half. Purdue needs points. Can they get it from anybody but Edey? I mean, you might as well, I guess, go to Edey every single possession at this point. But the problem is that all Edey can do is either get fouled or hit a 2. Like, he's not going to be able to give you 3 points most likely unless he hits a 2 and 1. It's just running out of time here. They need threes. Absolutely, Steven. Elite guard play haunting the Big Ten in the tournament yet again. This is why the Big Ten has not won a title since 2000. Elite guard play. The other conferences, the SEC, the Big 12, and even the Big East and the ACC have more talented guards than the Big Ten. And Purdue adding Lance Jones was big. Fletcher Lawyer, Braden Smith had good seasons. They're good guards. But you look at UConn's guards, Tristan Newton, Stephon Castle, Cam Spencer, they're just better. And UConn, they're up by 15, and they got the ball, and they're inbounding it. 6:40 to go in the second half. Nice behind-the-back dribble by Cam Spencer. Getting it across half court. Tristan Newton with the ball. Being guarded by Miles Colvin, who's not done much in this game for Purdue. But Matt Painter trying to play anybody that can maybe help out this team right now. Tristan Newton with the ball at the top of the key. Bleeding all of the clock. Taking a step back 3. He misses the shot, but a rebound by Alex Caravan. Out to Stephon Castle. 6:10 to go in the second half. I mean, these rebounds are killing Purdue. It's wasting even more time that they don't have. Tristan Newton with the ball, getting it into Castle, and Castle lays it in. I mean, it's just effortless. It's effortless for UConn. They make it look so easy. 63-46. Braden Smith with the ball for Purdue. But I don't even know if anything at this point that they could possibly do is going to help them. Zach Edey trying to drive at the top of the key. Gets it to Lawyer. And Lawyer, it's just been that kind of night for him. Edey did get the rebound, and it is a foul on UConn. So Edey will be going to the line. But, man, the Huskies, they've just dominated. And they picked up a lot of fouls because they've been hustling. And that's what you got to do. They have been hustling, out-hustling Purdue, getting all of the big rebounds, all the 50-50 balls. Samson Johnson just fouled out, so Klingon will probably come back in. But that's not the end of the world for UConn at this point, unless Klingon fouls out in like the next minute. That would be tough. Jackson says this isn't going to be the last title for Dan Hurley and the Huskies. Like I said, if he stays at UConn and he keeps coaching the way that he is, absolutely agree with you, Jackson. He could maybe win one or two more. Who knows? We have no idea what the future is going to hold. Maybe UConn doesn't ever get the perfect blend of players like they've had the last couple of years. Maybe Dan Hurley takes a Kentucky job. I mean, we have no idea. But I don't think he will. I think he's going to stay at UConn. The fan base loves him. I mean, there really isn't a reason to leave outside of maybe a little more money, but sometimes the grass isn't always greener. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with that. But if he stays at UConn, Husky fans, they're in for a treat, possibly. More championships could be on the way, possibly. Edey misses the first free throw. You can't have that, Purdue. Can't have missed free throws at this stage of the game. You're down big. You need points. Stephen Cherry agrees with Jackson on that sentiment. And Hummus Hero says, well, Purdue gets to join Illinois, Indiana, Ohio State, Michigan, and Wisconsin as national runner-up from the Big Ten this century. Yeah, at least Indiana can say that. They're in that group, right? I mean, they went in 2002 with Bob Knight's players, with Mike Davis the coach. But ever since then, Indiana hasn't made a deep run in the tournament since. But Illinois, yeah, they did it back in 2005. Ohio State did it back in, I think, 2007. Michigan did it a few years ago, 2019. So, yeah, I mean, definitely Wisconsin 2015. So, yeah, the Big Ten, they've gotten close, but they just can't win. It's not about getting to the championship game. It's about winning at the end of the day. Look at UConn. They know how to get it done. This is their sixth national title appearance, and they're probably going to be coming away with their sixth national title in the process. They don't lose when they get to the title. And Cam Spencer just adding to the Huskies' lead. 65-47. 5 to go in the second half. Largest lead tonight for the Huskies. I've been saying that a lot tonight. It's been the largest lead for UConn for the vast majority of the second half. They just keep extending the lead. Down the floor, inside, Edey laying it in. 65-49. I think there might be a timeout on the floor by Matt Painter and the Boilermakers. Probably a last-ditch effort by Matt Painter to try to instill in his guys, we still got a chance, we still got time, but I don't think there's any time left. I mean, UConn would literally have to go the next 4 minutes and 52 seconds without scoring, and Purdue would have to go almost every single possession that they have scoring the ball. Because you know UConn, every single possession that they take, they're going to use at least 20 to 25 seconds of the shot clock. They're not going to take quick shots. They're not a dumb team. That's why they're here. That's why they're playing at such a high level, because their team reflects Dan Hurley, who is a high IQ coach, whether you like his antics or not, or Dan Hurley at all, whether you like Dan Hurley or not. He's just a high IQ coach. He draws up plays. He knows what he's doing. He's bringing in talented players, and he gets these talented players to succeed. Dan Hurley is just that guy right now. Whether he continues to be that guy, that's up to him and the guys that he brings into the program at UConn, or if he goes to Kentucky, which I think is going to be at UConn. But that's just the way it goes with Dan Hurley. UConn is playing like a smart basketball team. They don't make these bad mistakes. They don't make silly errors. And they're going to use up the clock to the fullest and limit the possessions left in this game and make it almost impossible for Purdue to come back, even if UConn does go on a drought without scoring, which at this rate, it just doesn't seem like that's going to be the case. They're scoring almost every possession. And Zach Edey, he has scored his team's last 9 points. But at the end of the day, guard play is what's ruined Purdue in this game. We thought this year they were different, and they were for the vast majority of the season until they got to the title game. They absolutely disappeared. Outside of Braden Smith, Fletcher Loyer, Lance Jones, though, absolutely did. UConn using the clock. Caravan taking a three. It's off the mark. Purdue with the board. Boilers need buckets. Braden Smith down the floor. 4:30 to go in the second half. Kicking into the corner to Heidi. Heidi driving into the lane. Good defense by Stephon Castle. Kicks to Edey. Edey inside, and he misses the little floater shot that he's been so good at all season long and throughout his Purdue career, but he just couldn't get it to fall right there. 4 to go in the second half. Looks like UConn's cruising to their 6th national title win, a perfect 6-0 in national title games if they can get it done. That's an insane stat. No other team, no other blue blood can say that they're perfect in national title games outside of UConn. Tristan Newton with the ball, dribbling around. Kind of a bad possession for UConn, and then they get bailed out by a foul by Purdue. Good defensive possession for the Boilers. They did everything right on that possession until the end. They foul with 2 seconds left. And now UConn, they're going to be shooting free throws. Couldn't have that at all. Jackson said, looks like the national title drive of the Big Ten, which dates back to 2000, will continue. Absolutely. I mean, when is the Big Ten going to win a title? Because looking at the teams in the conference, none of the teams are built to win a title right now. Could they be built to win a title? Yes. But it's the way that the conference plays basketball. It's crazy. I mean, the way that the conference plays basketball and just how the referees basically referee the Big Ten, it just is not conducive for national title teams coming out of that conference. It just isn't. Especially when these other conferences are bringing in more talented players, guys that are run and gun, going up and down the floor. I don't know. To me, I'm just not seeing it for the Big Ten. I mean, they're going to win a title eventually. I don't know when that's going to be. It could be 15 years from now. It could be next year. You never know. Anything's possible. But the way the Big Ten is playing and the way their style of play is right now and the way the game of college basketball has begun to mirror the NBA more and more with the style of play, it just doesn't look good for the Big Ten to win a title. Purdue, you had the beast in Zach Edey, and he got him all the way here. What a season he had, back-to-back player of the years, but it just didn't matter at the end of the day because Purdue's guards did not show up when it mattered in the title game. Stephen Cherry says UConn making Purdue look slow. They're executing on another level. And that's the funny thing, Stephen Cherry. You're saying all of the things that I said. You and Hummus here are saying all the things I said in my short. I love it. You guys are absolutely correct. I said that in my short predicting UConn to win. I said that I feel like UConn is just going to be quicker. I know that sounds insane. They're all basketball players. They're all fast, right? But UConn has a different gear than Purdue. Even Alabama does. Like, I don't know if Alabama would have beaten Purdue if it was Alabama-Purdue in the national title game, but there's a good chance Alabama would have beaten Purdue. Because even though Alabama didn't have the big to really handle Edey, UConn has the big to handle Edey, and Edey's still getting his points. But I feel like Alabama's guards, their team was quicker. They might have been able to beat Purdue as well. I mean, it would have definitely been more debatable. I think a lot of people would have picked Purdue, but Alabama could have beaten Purdue. But UConn, they're just on a whole other level. Their team's quicker. They have more athleticism. Purdue doesn't have that. And even with Zach Edey, the best player in college basketball statistically the last 2 seasons, it absolutely did not matter. Jackson said this is basically the college basketball equivalent of the 2023 college football national title where Georgia smacked TCU 65-7. Said the Georgia beating was worse than – oh, absolutely. I mean, this isn't even close. Like, to mirror that, you would have to have UConn be winning like 80-40. It's not that bad for sure, but you are right, Jackson. I mean, it is kind of like that in a way because this game isn't close at all, and it stinks. I wanted it to be a classic. I wanted it to be a close game. We all did that aren't fans of Purdue or UConn, obviously. We just wanted it to be a good game. But unfortunately, UConn's just too good. Stephen Cherry says 6 natties is definitely blue blood status. I agree. I mean, they're a blue blood. They don't have the history of the other programs still. They don't have as many all-time wins, but they're a blue blood. We can crown them blue bloods. UCLA, unless you don't want to say it because they haven't won a title in forever, they're a blue blood from the past. Then you got Kentucky, Kansas, Duke, Carolina, and UConn. All of them are blue bloods. And then you take a program like Indiana. It's debatable because they haven't won in forever, but they still got 5 titles. But other than that, there's not really any other programs that are. But UConn, they're blue bloods now. They're absolutely a blue blood school. And men's basketball, women's basketball, definitely for sure. Both programs are elite. Absolutely. And UConn, to add insult to injury to Purdue, knocks down both free throws. It's 67-49. And Hurley has Klingon on the bench knowing he doesn't really need him right now. Yes, Edey's still in the game, but Purdue needs 3s, not 2s. Inside, bad foul by the Husky. That's a bad foul. Really bad foul right there. Didn't need it at all. Braid Smith, smart play for him driving the lane, get some contact, go to the line. But I still don't even think 2 free throws are really going to matter because UConn just keeps scoring every time they go down the floor. Unfortunately, it's just kind of futile. But you got to give credit to Purdue. They're still battling to the end. The Ohio State says UConn is just too good. They are a machine. If UConn keeps this culture up, could they three-peat next year? Klingon and Caravan or Sophomore and Castle's a freshman. The problem is the Ohio State is, will those guys be back? If Castle, Klingon, and Caravan all return, yes, I think there's a shot if UConn brings in a couple other really good transfers in the portal and Dan Hurley continues the culture, yes, they could win another one. It's very well possible. But Castle could be a lottery pick. And Klingon could be a lottery pick. and Caravan could leave as well. If those guys leave for the NBA, then no, I don't think UConn's going to three-peat. I think they're going to lose too much this time, and it's going to be very hard for Dan Hurley to bring in enough talent to be able to get him back to a national championship game and win. But we'll have to see. It's going to be tough decision-makings for those guys. But he's got a great culture. Maybe they will want to win it again. But I think the NBA is going to be too tough to pass up for a guy like Stephon Castle. But you never know. Purdue did get the ball back down low. Zach Edey laying it in. 67-52. So the Boilermakers have cut it to 15. I mean, they're still trying. Purdue fans are clapping. But, I mean, I still believe it's futile here. UConn has a big enough lead. They're just going to bleed this clock unless Purdue fouls. And they're not fouling, which to me, it almost would be wise for Purdue to try to foul because they are down by as much as they are. But UConn's a really good free throw shooting team as well, so maybe it wouldn't be a good idea to foul. Ball went out of bounds. Dan Hurley losing his mind over there. I love how Dan Hurley, though, he's still coaching, right? There's 3 minutes left in this game. His team's up by 15, and he's losing his mind. He's still going crazy. I mean, he's going to continue to argue till the end. It's because it was a turnover. That's why he's frustrated. Lance Jones for three. What a block by Cam Spencer. Lawyer inside to Zach Edey. Kicks to Lance Jones. Jones driving in. And Lance Jones finally with a really good play. 67-54. And Matt Painter uses his last timeout. I mean, I guess it makes sense for him to use the timeout because his team's cut it to 13. I mean, it's like a last-ditch effort at this point. But the problem is that, like I said, I mean, UConn, if Purdue doesn't foul them, they're going to use 30 seconds every time. I mean, mathematically, is there still enough time left for Purdue to even come back? I don't think so. It'd be very close if UConn doesn't score again, but I think they're going to run out of time here. Jackson said the only time we've ever seen a team three-peat in college basketball was UCLA, where they won 7 consecutive national titles from 1967 to 73. And I'm pretty sure, I mean, I wouldn't bet anything on it because, again, I don't bet, but I would bet if I did that would not happen again. We live in a completely different environment now in college sports. You know, I don't really see another team doing that, but you never know, right? I mean, you never know. Maybe UConn can do it. Maybe they can win 3, 4, 5 titles in a row. That would be very hard, though, in this day and age. There's so many tournament games. Back then, there were less tournaments. Because I'm not saying it wasn't impressive for UCLA to do that with John Wooden, but there weren't as many good teams back then. And the tournament only had like 16 or 32 teams or whatever. It wasn't as many teams, less games. So it was a lot easier to do that, I believe. I don't think that's ever going to happen again, but it could. Anything's possible. Like getting a perfect bracket is technically possible, but it's basically impossible. That's the way I see a team winning 7 consecutive titles in a row. Maybe Dan Hurley can defy the odds. Hummus Hero said, I think this actually was a very great Purdue team. This UConn team is one of the best teams in the past decade. I agree. If Purdue didn't have to play UConn, they probably beat almost any other team in this game. Alabama maybe could have won. You never know. But I think most teams, I believe Purdue would have won against like 98% of teams easily in this championship game. I agree with you. I think they were a great team. But the problem is this might be the best Purdue team that they have for a very long time. I mean, can Purdue still be good next year? Losing Edey. I mean, UConn could still be good next year and beyond with Hurley if he keeps this up. Whereas Purdue, will they fade off? It's going to be interesting. Jackson said on the bright side for Purdue, at least they didn't lose to a 15 or 16 seed. I mean, if Purdue, Jackson, lost in the round of 32, if they had won the first game and then lost in the round of 32, fans would have been disappointed. They wouldn't even have been happy with that. Like, I think, like, it really was Final Four or bust for Purdue, and they got it done. They made it to a championship game. Hadn't made it to a Final Four since 1980, made it to a championship game. I mean, they achieved almost everything they wanted. They didn't get the title, but it definitely was a great season for Purdue. That will be remembered forever. The Ohio State said, where do you think Edey will be taken in the draft? That's a great question, the Ohio State. I personally don't think he should be a first-round pick. I know everybody's going to disagree with that because they say that he's gotten quicker and he's improved in certain categories. But I just believe with the way the NBA game is played today, I don't think he should be a first-round pick. I think he should be like early to mid-second. I mean, you take a guy like Trace Jackson-Davis last year, who was the second-to-last pick in the draft. Forward out of Indiana. Look how well he did in college. I mean, arguably, he was the second-best player in college basketball last season behind Zach Edey. Look what he's doing with the Warriors. And he was the second to last pick in the draft. If he was taken that low, I think Zach Edey should be like maybe in the 30s or 40s in the draft. But he could be taken in the first round. I mean, he's been this dominant. I mean, he had 33 points tonight. He scored 40 points against Tennessee. So maybe somebody will be like, hey, I want that. I want him as a first-round pick. I want a guy that's been that dominant in college basketball, and he has all that experience. And it seems like even though the NBA draft is still adamant on taking freshmen, it seems exclusively high up in the draft, they have been sneaking in some seniors and juniors and sophomores in there every now and then lately. Looks like maybe Dalton Connect could get taken high. So maybe Edey gets taken in the top 20 to 25. But I would go with like early second round. But we'll have to see what the NBA decide, which team takes them and where they take them at the end of the day. Hummus Hero says, when UCLA won all those titles, considering the tournament was also only 16 teams, I believe. Like you said, absolutely, Hummus Hero, I completely agree. It was 16 teams. I couldn't remember if it was 16 or 32. But, yeah, it was just a different environment. It like you said, it's still unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. Nothing to take away with John Wooden and UCLA, but it was just not the same environment. Anybody that compares it, and says it's the same, it's not the same. It's just definitely not the same. But you never know. UConn, I mean, they're the dynasty right now. They have the mini dynasty going. Can they keep it up? It's going to be interesting to foresee, and we'll definitely be here on the channel to continue covering college basketball next season. Definitely will still be covering college basketball. I really appreciate all you guys being here tonight. Appreciate all your support. Couldn't be here without you guys. It's been an awesome show, but the game wasn't super competitive, but still a lot of fun. But it looks like UConn going to go back-to-back. First time since Florida Gators in 06-07. And UConn building up that dynasty, building up that blue blood status. Huskies score again. They're up by 15 with 1:50 to go. Purdue on life support, driving in. Braid Smith going inside, misses. Zach Edey just flushing it home. Zach Edey's done the heavy lifting in this game. I mean, he's definitely boosted his draft stock for sure. Played fantastic, but it just hasn't mattered. Didn't get enough help from his teammates, which is unfortunate. I mean, he's not going to say nothing like that about his teammates. He's going to say we didn't do good enough, we should have done better and all that. But, I mean, it's definitely not Edey's fault in any way. I mean, Edey did everything he could do. Played really well. It's just unfortunate for him that he just couldn't get enough production from his teammates. His guards had to play well. His teammates had to get it done, and it's just the way that it goes. The Big Ten still is lacking in the guard department and good enough guards, elite-level guards that can help them win titles. UConn, they've got the deep team. They've got the deepest team you could argue in college basketball. Maybe outside of Auburn, there was a few other teams that were really deep, but this is a very, very deep team. I mean, like you just look at guys like Hassan Jara, who have been in college basketball for 5 seasons, and he's a guy averaging like 4 points, but he came in and contributed in this game. And then you got the 5-star talent of Stephon Castle, and then Caravan and Klingon, who are going to be NBA players. And then you have Tristan Newton and Cam Spencer, the blue-collar guys. They've been in college basketball a while. Came over to UConn. It's just incredible how Dan Hurley crafted this team. And as good as Purdue was, I mean, they still pretty much got blown out. Didn't get destroyed, but they kind of got blown out. It's unbelievable what UConn is doing. San Diego State was a good team last year. UConn handled them, and a lot of people didn't know if UConn could come back and do this again. But UConn did it, and arguably they look better this year than last year. They were probably better this year than last year, which is crazy. It's unbelievable. Stephen Cherry said Calipari wants to prove he can still get it done. Arkansas will win a natty within 5 years. Yeah, Stephen Cherry, if he does that, Arkansas fans, they will love Calipari forever. I mean, absolutely. They will be so happy with Calipari. I mean, that's why they're bringing him in. They're not bringing him in to go to Sweet 16s and round of 32s. They're bringing him in for him to go to Final Fours and win a title. And maybe Calipari feels like at Kentucky with that culture and environment that it just wasn't conducive for him to be able to win a title there. And now being at Arkansas, and he's got the backing of the Tyson family there and a lot of things going for him in that regard. Less expectations. Maybe he can get it done. We'll see. I mean, Calipari's got to adapt to modern college basketball, though. Has to adapt. I feel like his offensive style is still a little archaic. It's a little bit old and outdated. I think he needs to update it a little bit. And I believe that he needs to take more transfers. He needs to be able to not just rely on 5-star freshmen all the time. He needs to have more experience on his teams, because you look at Antonio Reeves and Trey Mitchell, the 2 seniors. The experienced players for Kentucky, they played well against Oakland, but the freshmen, Reed Shepherd, Robert Dillingham, who were going to be really good pros, they did not play well. Freshmen struggled to show up in March Madness. Yes, Stephon Castle did, but he's got a great team around him, and he's just that guy. I mean, sometimes you just get lucky in that department. Single NCAA tournament all time. UConn 2024 had the highest point differential of any team in NCAA tournament history, as long as that stands in the next 36 seconds, which it should. So that basically means that this UConn team was the most dominant team in March Madness history ever since the tournament has expanded to 68 teams, or 64 teams at least anyway. That's crazy. Not only did they go back-to-back, they've been that dominant as well. And Dan Hurley, he's got his son into the game. He always brings his son into the game if they're winning by a lot. He likes to have him hold the ball at the very end, letting the clock run out. Dan Hurley, he is pumped and jazzed up. UConn, they are the national champions. It's not over yet. 6 seconds to go, but it's all window dressing now. Absolutely insane how well UConn has played the last 2 years. The dynasty, it's real. It's being built. Can it continue? Only time will tell. But it's been built. And as the clock winds down to 0 seconds, Purdue couldn't get it done. They could not get their first national championship. UConn, the Huskies, cement their blue blood status with now 6 national titles. And they are the first team to go back-to-back since the Florida Gators and have the most point differential. The most point differential of any team in March Madness history. I mean, they're just breaking records, man. They are just breaking records all over the place. I mean, look at all the players. They are so blown away. I mean, they're holding up 2 fingers back to back, 6 fingers for 6 national titles. Look at Dan Hurley. I mean, he just acts like it's the norm, though. I mean, like he's shaking everybody's hand, like he's not going crazy. I mean, you see some coaches win a big regular season game and they lose it. Like they're going crazy and they're pumped up. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, especially if you're at a program that hasn't won in a long time. But Dan Hurley is acting like this is just business as usual. And that's what makes Dan Hurley the guy that he is, and possibly the guy that can continue to do this, whether at UConn or somewhere else. Maybe Kentucky, which it's probably going to be UConn, you would think. But, I mean, legitimately, it's insane. I mean, he just seems calm, like this is no big deal. You got to love Dan Hurley if you're a UConn fan. You do. You got to love Dan Hurley. Steven Cherry says, great job, Jeffrey. I appreciate your content. I appreciate you, Steven. I always enjoy reading your comments in the chat. I really appreciate all you guys for being here. Like I said, this would not be possible without you guys. You guys make these streams so fun. You make these games so enjoyable to watch, and I really appreciate it. I appreciate the compliment, Steven. I'll definitely have more content coming out on college basketball with the portal. Definitely going to be covering that. Whatever happens with this Kentucky situation, maybe we'll do some more live streams for the NBA playoffs. Got a lot of content coming up down the pike, and definitely will be covering college basketball next season. We're going to keep trucking along. We're trying to get on our way to 2,500 subs. We're getting there. Little over 150 away, but we're definitely going to try to get there, and appreciate all your guys' support. If you guys are new, subscribe to the channel. Really helps out the channel, but I do appreciate all you guys for being here. You guys are the best. Hummus Hero says this UConn team is one of the all-time greats, and it's all based on balance and depth. Absolutely. I mean, it's always great to have that go-to scorer. It's awesome, but you can key in on that guy. You look at Mark Sears with Alabama. You look at R.J. Davis at North Carolina. You look at Zach Edey in Purdue. Even though Zach Edey still dominated, but you can sometimes key in on that guy and shut him down. Or if he has a bad game, the other guys won't step up. Like UConn, legitimately, all of their players contributed in this game. Every guy that came into the game contributed and made an impact. And it's all balanced. Like, there's not one guy having, oh my goodness, he's got 25 points. He's got 30 points. No, it's like 15 points, 14 points, 12 points, 10 points. That's how you win. Like you said, Hummus here, the balance of the Huskies team is unbelievable. They're not selfish players. They all want to have success. They all want to contribute. I mean, it's team, but team before me. Like, legitimately. These players, they care about their team. They care about the success of the team, and they'll do anything it takes to win. Whether it's sacrificing individual stats. And that's how you get it done. Dan Hurley has found a formula with the perfect blend of returning players, freshmen that are talented, transfers that are experienced. He's got it cooking right now. He's got the formula. Can he continue to do it? Like I said, time will tell. We're going to be here to cover it. I can't wait to see if UConn's going to be building a dynasty or whether someone can take them down next year. It's going to be the talking point all offseason. Can anybody knock off UConn in the tournament next season? But Dan Hurley, if he stays at UConn, that's going to be the talking point, and he's going to do everything he possibly can to prevent that from happening. The Ohio State says UConn wins every game in the tournament by double digits. Again, just insane. I mean, that's the thing. Like, they're not just winning. They're not just winning by 5 points, 7 points, 3 points. They're blowing out good teams, legitimately good teams. Purdue was a good team. Bama was a really good team. Illinois was a really good team. And these games weren't contests. I believe Alabama played them the hardest. I do. I think Alabama legitimately played UConn the hardest. I do. I know the game got away late, but with 5 minutes to go, it was still competitive. Purdue was kind of out of this thing with 15 minutes left. They got down already by like 13 to 15. It was kind of over. It's crazy. The Ohio State says, I don't even know if you can be upset if you are Purdue. UConn is just a buzzsaw. I mean, obviously the fans are going to be upset. I mean, they were this close, and they know it's going to be tough for them to get there again. So they're very, very upset. But you can't be upset who you lost to and how you lost. It's not like they lost as a favorite to, like, you know, a team that really wasn't supposed to be there. Like maybe a San Diego State or something. Not that San Diego State's bad, but just a team like that. If somehow they made it. If Purdue lost it with San Diego State or maybe even like Creighton. Creighton's really good, but Purdue fans would have been upset. But playing UConn, I mean, there's just no – you can't even be, like, mad at your team. You can be upset that the guards didn't play better, but even if the guards did play better, it would have been tough for Purdue to get it done. Because then probably UConn would have played even better than they already did. Hummus Hero said, I think Edey showed us tonight that he isn't as slow as some people seem. He could be good in the league. Most of the bigs have outside game now, so that's a minus. Yeah, Hummus Hero, I agree. I mean, I've always been very critical of Zach Edey's game when it comes to being able to translate to the pros. I think he's an elite college basketball big. What he's able to do in college basketball is unbelievable. But I've always worried for him, can his game translate to the NBA? I've always been concerned with that. But I do agree with you, Hummus Hero, that the way that he played this season, it's helped, you know, his odds. It's helped his chances of having success. I agree. I still think he could struggle. I still think there is a possibility that his game doesn't translate all that well, and he could just end up being a bench guy. I don't think he's going to be like Taco Fall, where he's out of the league in 2 years or anything. He'll be in the league, but I just don't know, like, which team, what team would it benefit him to be on? Like, what team would the scheme that they run or whatever? Because most NBA teams run similar stuff. Would it benefit Edey the most to be on that team? Or what team's going to be able to give him playing time? Because a lot of teams have elite bigs. Like, he's never going to be able to play in front of guys like Giannis and Embiid and Jokic if he's on those teams that have those guys. He's not going to do that. So he's probably always going to be a bench guy. But being a bench guy is better than being a guy that's not in the NBA at all. And I think he has proven in some regards. It's just going to be very tough for him to translate it because the NBA is so quick. I mean, he's going to have a hard time getting down the floor on some possessions when he's in the game. Like, the other team's going to score before he gets down the floor a lot of times. It's just going to be interesting to see. I think he can have some success, but still going to be very tough. Steven said, I'll still say the UNLV squad with Larry Johnson, Stacey Aubin, Anderson Hunt, and Greg Anthony, the best team I've seen. That team was insane. Steven said, Hummus here. Yeah, there's been a lot of great teams. I mean, the last team to go undefeated in men's college basketball was Indiana back in 1976, but I don't really think a lot of people would say that was like one of the best teams of all time. I mean, Indiana had good teams, but even that undefeated team, like there's an argument that there's been better teams. And I mean, this UConn team this year, there is an argument, despite the fact they lost 3 games. It's different now. I mean, college basketball is different than it was back then. There's an argument this is one of the best teams of all time. It is an argument it's top 3. You can even make an argument that it's number 1. And I wouldn't even argue it. Hummus Hero said the Duke team that beat them in 91 was also elite. Absolutely. I mean, there's so many good teams. I mean, Stephen Cherry said, I agree. Hummus, Hill, Leitner, Hurley were a problem. Man, Christian Leitner. A lot of people didn't like Christian Leitner, but for people that did like Christian Leitner, I mean, he was a fun player to watch. The Ohio State says 3 of the teams UConn beat in this title run were Big Ten teams, Northwestern in the round of 32, Illinois in the Elite 8, and Purdue in the national title game. And whether that, you know, you can say help UConn because the Big Ten doesn't have great teams, I believe Illinois was really good, and I believe Purdue was really good. I mean, if UConn had played Alabama, or if UConn had played Houston, or UConn did play Alabama, but like they beat them by not as much as like these other teams. But like if they had played Houston, or if they had played maybe a Duke, how much would they have won? I don't know. These other elite teams, Carolina, I wanted them to play play Carolina. I wanted, I was very happy for Jackson and for Alabama fans that they won, but I wanted Carolina to beat Alabama because I want to see what Carolina could do against UConn. But I just think that outside of Alabama, like they were the only team that to me was like could match up with the speed of UConn. But what about these other teams? Could any of them give UConn a great game? I don't know. I mean, we'll never know, obviously. But I think that there's a really good chance UConn would have beaten them all. I mean, Houston was kind of slow too. They had good defense, but they were kind of slow. Duke had a little bit of speed, but I don't know. I mean, it's crazy. Like Alabama was that team that gave them the best run for their money. And they didn't even – wasn't even that close. So UConn was just that good. I mean, they lost earlier in the season, but those early season games don't really matter. I mean, you lose early in the season, no one really cares. What matters is winning right now, and that's what UConn did. But to your point, the Ohio State – beating those 3 Big Ten teams, some people could argue, well, that made it easier. The Big Ten's not good, but I think those were good teams. Maybe you can argue it helped, but UConn probably would have won against whoever they played. We will never know against some of those teams, but they did play a run-and-gun team in Alabama and still beat them. Stephen Cherry says, Edey reminds me of Yao Ming. Yeah, I mean, you probably saw, Stephen. Everybody saw it trending on Twitter, right? People were saying instead of Yao Ming, Foul Ming, right? Because Edey draws a lot of fouls, especially that Tennessee game. Man, Rick Barnes lost it. There were so many fouls in that game. But, yeah, I think the reason why a lot of people say that is because, Zach Edey goes to the line a lot, but his game is similar to Yao Ming. They're both really tall. Both have similar skill sets. I mean, Yao Ming had a lot of knee problems later in his career, which is why his career wasn't that long. But Zach Edey, I mean, he hasn't had any issues so far, and he's very durable. He's very strong with his lower body. Maybe he will be able to play in the league longer, especially if he can't carve out a role in the modern-day NBA and play longer than Yao Ming. Plus, Yao Ming started a lot, played a lot more minutes. If Edey is coming off the bench, that might protect his knees, and he'll be able to play a lot longer. So, I mean, it's a great comparison for sure. Hummus here said 91, UNLV lost 1 game. It just happened to be to Duke in the national championship. Crazy stuff. I mean, they were so close. Same thing with Gonzaga. Gonzaga was very close to going undefeated that season a few years ago, but then they lost to Baylor. They lost to Baylor in 2021. They were undefeated all year. And then you had the Wichita State team that was undefeated. Then they lost like in the Elite Eight or something like that. Then you had the Kentucky team that was undefeated, and then they lost in the Final Four to Wisconsin back in 2015. And then you also had the Kentucky team that was undefeated that won it all with Anthony Davis, but they only lost to Indiana by 1 point in the regular season. Christian Watford's 3. So there's been a lot of teams that have almost gone undefeated and won it all. And even though UConn's been as dominant as they have been the last 2 years, they've lost some games. It's almost like it's better to lose a game. Like if you go undefeated in the regular season, it puts more pressure on you to not choke in the tournament. Like if you have lost some games, it's like you learn from, and you're like, we're not going to do that again. So like if UConn was undefeated, would they have won? Would they have choked? I have no idea, but that's just an interesting thing to think about. The Ohio State says, thank you for all your great content and videos and live stream this college basketball season. Really great work. I appreciate that, via Ohio State. I mean, it means a lot. I really, really do appreciate it so much because, when I see your guys' comments in chat and on my videos, I mean, it's a confidence booster. I mean, it makes you just want to continue to work hard and make more content for you guys. And I enjoy doing it. I really, really do enjoy doing it. And I like, seeing people's reaction when I make a video or make a short, like especially when I make a short, right? And I predict the team that thinking the other team's going to win, and I pick the other team, and it's like, you're going to be wrong. And then I am wrong, and I always own up to them. Like, yeah, I was wrong, you're right. But then when I'm right, a lot of times they don't usually respond. That's okay. But I do appreciate you for stopping by, leaving a comment in the first place. But I appreciate every single person that comments on my channel. I definitely do. It means so much to me, and I appreciate you guys showing up and all these live streams for these games. Hummus Hero says, correction, 91 UNLV lost to Duke in the Final Four. Excuse my memory, it was 33 years ago, and I was 9. I didn't correct you, Hummus Hero. I'm sure if Jackson was still in here, I don't know if Jackson's still here. I think he might be doing a stream of his own, but Jackson, if he was here, he probably would have known because he definitely studies up on the history. But I was just going along with it. I couldn't exactly remember. But, yeah, UNLV with Jerry Tarkanian, fantastic coach, had some good teams. Always known as the guy that had the towel. Hummus Hero said, going to the tournament unbeaten has become a curse. Absolutely. I mean, it's better to lose. Like, lose a game in the regular season, and like, you just automatically have a better shot to win the title if you're an elite team like UConn. You just don't want to go undefeated. going into the tournament. It's just never good. Stephen Cherry says Cincinnati squad was undefeated going into the tournament when Kenyon Martin led. That team was loaded. Yeah, that's a good point as well. There's been so many teams, though. I can't even keep them all straight, but there's been a lot of teams that had a shot to go undefeated, but only Indiana did it back in 76. Eventually, another team's going to do it, but it's going to be interesting to see which team does it. Maybe it will be UConn eventually. And then via Ohio State says you should stream some NBA playoffs. I definitely will. Those playoffs are coming up. Right when college basketball ends, you're like, you got a break. Nope. The NBA playoffs are coming up. That should be a lot of fun, but I probably will be able to stream some of those games. I did last year. I didn't stream as many tournament games this year as I did last year. Kind of just ran out of time a little bit on certain nights, but I definitely tried to do as many as possible, and I kept, doing prediction videos and keeping up with the coaching carousel, and we'll keep updating with the transfer portal, but I'll have more content coming out, probably trying to make a video tomorrow if something big happens, maybe with the Kentucky news or maybe something big happens in the portal, but I'll keep having content coming out, and I will stream some NBA playoff games. But congratulations to the UConn Huskies for going back-to-back, winning 6 national titles. Now, Dan Hurley going back-to-back is incredible. UConn, do whatever you can to keep him. He's a fantastic coach, and he possibly can end up building you a dynasty if you keep him. He doesn't go away to Kentucky. So it's going to be interesting to see there. I can't wait to see what happens in the future, see if anybody can upstage UConn just like a team was finally able to upstage Georgia in college football and prevent them from doing a three-peat. So it's going to be really interesting. Sucks for Purdue fans. Really hate it for them that they came so close but fell short to the UConn Huskies. The buzzsaw that is UConn, Purdue, it's going to be tough without Edey, but maybe they can still have some success without him. It's going to be really interesting. But I appreciate all you guys for being here tonight. It was a fantastic game. Definitely, even though it really wasn't that close overall, but still a great game to watch. Love the national championship, regardless of what happens. Always going to check it out, even if it's maybe not always the teams you want to see or if it's close. Definitely going to check it out. So still a great game. The environment was big enough as is, even though the game wasn't close. But you guys made it a fantastic stream. Really appreciate it. Hummus Hero said, thanks for all your work this season, Jeffrey. Really appreciate that, Hummus Hero. I definitely really do appreciate it, and we'll keep making content next season and all in the off season. But thank you, Hummus Hero. Thanks to all of you guys. Like the stream down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. Share the stream out on social media. But most importantly, I appreciate all you guys. Thanks for a fantastic college basketball season. You guys made it fantastic. And UConn capped it off with a national title win. Their 6th title back-to-back. It's crazy stuff, and I cannot wait for the offseason to begin, see what's going to happen with the portal, because that's going to be crazy, and then we're going to have to start it all over again next year. It's going to be a lot of fun, and we'll definitely be back for that. But thanks for being here, everybody. Really appreciate it. College basketball is over. Congratulations to the UConn Huskies for winning the national title this year in 2024. Thanks for being here, everybody.